Bullshit, I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
Willie hears ya. Willie don't care. Hey Gumby, what's up, man?
Incoming transmission from Mariano Gumby. It's going.
That's about how my my last 2 weeks has been feeling, man. So I added a bunch of new background music into the mix from Bob. I know how I feel about this one.
Incoming transmission from Mariano Gumby. I need motivated to switch to Linux. May you help me get motivated to switch?
Yeah, you can't be a real hacker if you don't use Linux as your daily driver and on your cell phone. So if you want to be elite, you gotta switch to Linux. Not last agent. What's up, man? Speaking of Linux, Gumby, I mean, now's the perfect time to explore it, considering Windows 10 is officially end of life.
Incoming transmission from Mariano Gumby. The games man, they are stopping the anti-cheat is bullshit and they want to fix it to work.
I know, man. It's I hate to say it, I've just given up on a lot of games. And as awesome as Battlefield 6 looks, it's unfortunate because I think a lot of the games developers, they're going to have to go through winter, man. Winter is coming for that ass. What's up, everybody? Yeah. They...
Incoming transmission from Mariano Gumby. I just want my Fortnite on Linux, man.
I would be surprised if... Oh, okay, that's right. Because that's by Riot, and they're using... I forget which anti-cheat they're using, but I remember it's not on Linux. What is it using, actually? Fortnite anti-cheat. What is it? Oh, yeah, I thought it was easy anti-cheat. Yeah. And easy anti-cheat's like, not so easy to put on Linux, is it? What's going on, everybody? I hope you're all having a great day today. I had an absolutely beatdown of a day. So I'm working with this client, and they've got a lot of controls. Some of them legit, some of them just weirdly structured. And so it has been a beatdown getting a C2 implant inside that environment. So today we were standing up a completely different command and control system to try and get something working in their environment. My brain was cooked. I did eventually eat dinner, but like after work, I just went boop. I'm gone. Epic Games can get the game stores, not the game. Hold on. What do you say? Epic Games. So, but you can get the game store, but not the game. Oh, that's stupid. The Sam Curry poker hacks. I'm not sure what you mean, though. I was just going through and perusing the news real quick before we hopped on here. There was actually a really good one up here. The near Return of the King. I have to always come delete this banner out right here because it drives me crazy. I don't know why. For some reason, the Spectrops blog hates this browser. Where are we at here? Is that it? Nope. It's got to be up here. There we go. Delete that out. There we go. Because it eats up like half the screen up here. I think it's actually a WordPress thing, but that's neither here nor there. So this one was a neat one because we had Bad Successor, but apparently there's a successor to the Bad Successor because Bad Successor was patched by Microsoft shortly after it came out. So I'm just trying to see what we've got over in the news cycle that might be super interesting. Rootkit analysis I'm not super interested in. Oh, we probably should go take a look at this. So Mudge, this is the guy who wrote Cobalt Strike. Very old school, well-traveled wizard of a hacker man. It looks like he's updating and expanding the Tradecraft Garden, which now has a BSD license. So the dynamic function resolution and optimization along with the merge lib makes your position-independent code easier to write. Ooh. I'll take a brief look at that. We'll see how far down Mudge goes on it. But he's a super, super smart guy. Let's see. Exploit dev on ARM64. Pass. Breaking Defenders, cloud communication. I actually read this one. It wasn't a big deal, if I remember correctly. I'll take another look at it. I want to make sure I understood it correctly. I looked at it briefly, and I think I knew what they were doing. Let's see. More bring your own vulnerable driver. macOS shortcuts for initial access. Interesting. I quit gaming for a while, to be honest. Migrated fully away from Windows because I was on Windows 11. Oh, yeah. I'm about to get off of Windows. Be done with it.
Incoming transmission from Marano Gumby. That mess up thing is I play Overwatch 2 on Linux all the time, so anti-cheat will work, but these studios do like us Linux users.
They do not like us Linux users. It's bunk. Let's see. An execute assembly Pico. Ooh. Oh, actually, yeah. I want to take a look at this because I think these two might be related. Hold on, I'm organizing the ones that I want to talk about tonight. Okay, hold on. There's some of these songs. So by the way, FYI, I added a buttload of new songs into the background music since Tubob has a huge library of them. However, not all the songs are ones I want to keep, but it's a huge library. So I gotta make a list of the ones that I want to take out of that folder. What is this one? Kingmaker. Okay. And yeah, if you're wondering, I'm literally just putting it on a sticky note because the sticky notes are more annoying than a text file that I'll ignore. I'm not going to ignore the sticky note. But did I tell you that I got a second stage interview in about 12 hours? Nice, dude. That must mean that they thought you were pretty decent, dude. All right, let's see what else we've got in here. Bad takeover beacon object file. I might actually be able to use that on my current pen test or red team assessment. What's detonator agent? Detonates malware on VMs and logs detection status. I'm always interested in new detection stuff. Surveyor, advanced Windows kernel analysis system profiling tool. Cool. Kraken hashes, distributed password cracking system designed for security professionals and red teams. They're usually always wrappers around Hashcat because Hashcat is the king, but they usually don't ever necessarily do a great job of it.
Incoming transmission from Marano Gumby. I'm starting a revelation for Linux. Stand up against them Linux user unite, like take them all down.
You're starting a Linux revelation. Yeah. Let's see. The iOS keyboard is broken. Something strange is going on with the input such animations versus the output. Ah, okay. Gotcha. All right, let's go take a look at some of these things in here. Because like I said, I didn't see a ton of the ones in here. Let's take a look at this Weeding the Tradecraft Garden from Munge, from the Adversary Fanfiction Writers Guild.
Incoming transmission from Marano Gumby. Revolution,
right? Oh, so the job is for a cybersecurity engineer internship. So it's technical, but not hands-on. It'll be our first role in IT and cybersecurity. Dude, if you're doing cybersecurity engineering, then, I mean, you should hopefully get some hands-on experience in there. Because, I mean, that's the definition of getting hands-on experience on the blue side is doing security engineer. That's awesome, though, man. I'm rooting for you, bro. Let's see here. Weeding the Tradecraft Garden. So quick aside here. So what happened is, I don't know, a couple months ago, Raphael Munch, the guy who wrote Cobalt Strike, he also then, I think, left Fortra, who now owns Cobalt Strike. And when he did that, he was just kind of chilling. He's rich. He can do pretty much whatever he wants. But he decided he wanted to keep kind of moving the security conversation forward. So he created something called the Tradecraft Garden and Crystal Palace. And those were two little pieces of code designed to help move some security offensive tooling forward and try to maybe reduce a little bit of the black box to it. I'm trying to struggle with the recollection of it. But this is an update to those because he's released it. It got a lot of traction on the offensive security side. So now, looks like he's realized, hey, we've got some issues we could try and clean up. So that's what this one is. The Tradecraft Guard was the initial release of everything. Let's see. All right, so when I started to work on Crystal Palace, my initial thought was to see how much I could ease development of position-independent code capability loaders, using that to manipulate possible linkers. So the initial Tradecraft Guard examples were built with these primitives. Crystal Palace didn't just merge and append COFs. These are like basically the open source version of beacon object files for Cobalt Strike. So it's a powerful binary transformation framework as well. That is, Crystal Palace has the ability to disassemble a compiled program, turn it into an abstract form, manipulate it, and put it back together. So that's awesome. I haven't done a lot of digging into Crystal Palace. I've been meaning to. The technology is at the foundation of Crystal Palace's code mutation, a link time optimizer, and a function disco features. Disco boogie. So before we go further, I'd like to give a shout out to Austin for orchestrating modern implants with LLVM and Fortra for both presentations at Black Hat 2025. One of the LLVM uses he described was transforming non-position independent code x86 programs into a working PIC. I'm just going to call those PICs now. So it's a cool talk and it inspired me to look at binary transformations to make Crystal Palace PICs more ergonomic, which gave it some new features. Cool. I'm always up for new features. So this release adds features to transform 32 and 64-bit programs written in the Pico conventions into working position-independent code. So while these binary transformations are opt-in, you can still manually copy and paste, I guess it meant maybe ROT13, hashes from elsewhere if you really want to. They greatly simplify writing PICs, and I'm all in with them. All of the examples in the Tradecraft Guard were simplified with these tools. Nice. Hey, Spirit, what's up, man? So taking full advantage of the unified convention from x86 and 64-bit PICs and from Picos, this release introduces the Crystal Palace concept of shared libraries to aid modularity, code reuse, and open opportunities to participate in the ground truth ecosystem. Cool. Hey. Spirit, I'm doing really good, man. I hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday. Bit of a beatdown day at work, but a little bit of a nap and some dinner. I was in a way better mood. I was hangry, I guess. Let's see. So he's talking about dynamic function resolution. So one of the defining features of Cobalt Strike's beacon object files and the Crystal Palace Picos are dynamic function resolutions. So that is when you would call the Win32 API as a module function to give the loaders the needed hints to resolve to the correct function pointer. Crystal Palace now has dynamic function resolution for 32 and 64-bit PICs. And because the PIC has no loader, acting on this convention requires a different approach. So here's the binary transformation framework that helps. Nerd! Shut up, baby. I know it. Hey, Euler, what's up, man? It's 2 a.m. and I'm learning recurrent neural I can't remember if it's recurrent or recombinant neural RNNs. Dude, baller. I love it. It is recurrent neural networks. Got it. Happy hump day. Yes. Still not sponsored by Jocko, agent. But then again, until I complete the video of me doing a Murph, which, by the way, if you don't know what a Murph is, that's an extreme exercise. And I was going to take that and I was going to super cut it in with a bunch of stuff from the stream and then send that to Jocko. Be like, sponsor me. There's a lot of folks, actually, Cesaris, that come in from Europe. I love it. I get a lot of folks from England, Europe, Switzerland. They all pop in the stream. I freaking love it, man. I don't know why that causes the delay sometimes, Euler. I have no clue. Let's see. I really need to take time to go dig into because so my to-do list has been ever expanding because we've been working on HackBot so much, and actually a lot of my coworkers at work, they're all in on a bunch of the AI stuff too. I'm not all in on it, but I'm exploring it and examining it and trying to learn as much as I can. However, they are very interested in like the saga of HackBot. So like every Monday, pretty much, I go give them an update on like what happened over the weekend with it. And they're all just like replying with popcorn emotes. They love to see the stuff that's coming up with it. So But once we get that going a little bit more, the special agents is actually what I'm looking the most forward to, because then as we build the special agents out, I can start working on something like this and start building a special agent for it too, to try and help solidify some of the knowledge in there. Anyway, little aside, let's go back to this. So he's talking about doing the dynamic function resolutions inside these position independent code objects that we're setting up to it. Let's see. So this is opt-in, you change your resolver method here. So there's two resolver methods right now. You have roar13 and you have string. So the method dictates the arguments generated and passed to the resolver. I don't know what roar13 is. What is that? I think that's a hashing method for doing... I think the way they're using it is it's a hash for targeting API calls in Windows, if I remember correctly. I haven't done a Murph since I was in the military. It's going to be rough, Gumby. It's going to be rough, especially since I can't really run with a weight vest due to my back. So I'm just going to have to hoof it. Just going to have to put some put feet to pound to pavement. Let me see what else he's talking about here. So Crystal Palace's pick dynamic function resolution. You got me messed up, Gumby. The dynamic function resolution convention expects you resolving a Win32 API. Yeah, from already loaded library. So if you're writing a fully fledged capability as a pick, make sure you load any libraries necessary at the beginning of your program. So yeah, I believe what he's doing here with these roar13s is they're doing that to form a hash to help find, basically it's called API hashing in malware. I haven't done it. I'm telling you what I know of it. And when you do that API hashing, it lets you stop the EDR from intercepting it. I wish I could get... Hang on. All right. So what happens here is, like, basically whenever you come and load up, I wish I could get the pen fixed. Here we go. So what happens is when you load up your program, right, what it wants to do is it wants to go find certain APIs over in like the Windows 32 API, right? So this is Windows right here. And it has a whole bunch of function calls kind of built into it. And everything's usually passed by pointers. So it's like, okay, yeah, this is where I'm going to go for here, and this is where I'm going to go for here. Well, what happens whenever you have something like EDR sitting in here is you don't have these arrows that pop up. So when you've got your antivirus sitting in here, what they'll do is they'll load in to catch those things in the middle. So when you try to load a particular function, instead it loads the antivirus version, and then the antivirus kind of forwards that traffic on after it examines it in memory over to the actual Windows function. So by doing this roar13, you're allowing it to try and find that original one and bypass the antivirus version of it and go back to hitting the Windows version. I think that's what he's doing here. It's more like, instead of man in the middle though, it's like memory in the middle. Because all they're doing is they're changing the memory addresses for it to point to. But yeah, that's essentially how a lot of endpoint detection response systems, antivirus, that's how they work. And they basically intercept all those function calls, and then they have a short amount of time, because they don't want to try to impact the user too much, to then forward those calls over to the actual Windows resolved function. So yeah, they're intercepting all that stuff in memory. Let's see. So we're right here. So the roar13 method will turn a module and a function into a roar13 hashes and pass them as arguments to the resolver function. That string method pushes strings onto the stack, calls your resolver with pointers to these strings, and most Tradecraft Garden simple loaders demonstrate the roar13 method. Got it. Okay. So one of the barriers to a unified code for x86 and the 64-bit PICs was the addressing model. So 32 programs reference data using a model known as direct addressing, and this is they expect to know the full address of any data that they work with. The Crystal Palace pick so far has worked around x86's direct addressing model with some hacks. Crystal Palace patches in an offset to any reference data and expects somehow that the PIC's C code takes special steps to turn off the offset into a full pointer. Oh, okay. Interesting. Man, I really like what he's doing here. I wish I understood it a little bit better. I especially wish I understood it more today because I'm going to try and actually create a beacon object file for some shenanigans on the current red team I'm on. And I haven't had to make one yet. It's a learning process. Let's see. So we talk about fixing the pointers in here. Try to see if there's just anything other piece of information. Now, the reason this is funny, what should go first, is because whenever you make a beacon object file or a cough, it's always the go function that gets triggered. So you always see like a go function in there. That's why it's funny. So in position independent code, your entry point must live at position 0 for your program. The tradecraft garden used to satisfy this requirement by specifying a go function at the top of the program before everything else gets included and having it call the real entry point. So now you can declare your entry point as go, and it will make the pick go first. Crystal Palace will move the function to your position 0. Interesting. Okay. I wish I could give more information on this. Actually, I do want to know what the licensing change here, because you always have to worry about software licensing. I don't know the details of BSD in depth. So when I originally released the Tradecraft Garden, I chose the BSD license for Crystal Palace, which was a deliberate choice to welcome the components integration to use in commercial and open source projects. Separately, I chose GLP v2 for the Tradecraft Garden example loaders. So I like the idea of GLP v2 as a way to keep the derived tradecraft open. My goal isn't just an open source ecosystem, though. I want something that welcomes the security conversation, aligned commercial players to co-create value with this commons. So a permissive license better serves my goal to create the security conversation aligned ecosystem and more opportunities for offensive security research. Let's see. How do you manage to focus for a long time? I keep going to YouTube and my phone every 5 minutes. So my particular phone, Spirit, it's a Pixel. One of the features that it has is if I put it face down, it puts it in do not disturb mode. So I don't hear any of the notifications that come up from it. So when I put it face down, I can actually leave my hand on it and I feel it do a couple little haptic buzzes. That way I know it's there. And then I have a problem with that too. Like I'll have a screen up and it's like playing YouTube or something. It is difficult in the beginning. I have that same issue. Trust me, I still fight it because I want my little dopamines from watching YouTubes and stuff. But once I start really getting into it, and then when I realize that YouTube is kind of becoming a distraction, I turn it off. Yeah, I keep wanting to go back to it, but then I just remind myself, hey, no, this is distracting you. And you can focus a lot better. So it's really a lot of discipline as you go through it, Spirit. And there's some things that work out really well for like background noise that don't distract me. I don't know why, but scary, spoopy ghost videos on YouTube. Stuff like Nuke's Top 5. Or what's another one in there? Not Sir Spooks, I forget. There's another one in there, but stuff like Nuke's Top 5, where it's like just scary videos where I just like, can listen to it. Those ones, for some reason, they don't distract me and I find them entertaining. I don't know why. Like candy for the brain, it keeps you wanting. It is, exactly. I use that exact same example to explain to my kids why they're not allowed to just be on screens all day. They take after me. They want to be attracted to the shiny blue lights. And I tell them the same thing. It's like, hey, this is like candy for your brain. And for some reason, you know, your mom and I don't give you a ton of candy because it's bad for your teeth. We don't give you a ton of screen time until certain conditions are met, right? You got to finish all your schoolwork. You got to clean up all your toys. You have to have had a nap already. They're 3 and 6. And so you don't get it until the afternoon, and then you get it for a set amount of time. So we have like conditions for that to keep them on task. And believe me, it's very easy to just like let your kids go and be on the screens all day, but that ruins their attention span. Absolutely wrecks it. And if right now my older son, he actually gave up video game time to go watch drawing videos because he started getting really interested in drawing. So he's like learning how to like draw with like colored pencils and stuff. I try to be, dude. A lot of days I feel like I'm an absolute wreck of a dad. I'll be honest with you. I don't feel like I'm doing all that great a job. But then today at bedtime, they told me, yeah, we had the best day. And so my wife, she left her job back in March or maybe it was April, but earlier in the year. and she's been staying home with them. They're homeschooled. They get to see her all day. They do their schoolwork. They're learning a ton, and they have a lot of free time to like go and explore and be creative. And today they told me just how they had such an awesome day. And that's one of the things that helped me get over the absolute beatdown of a day I had trying to set up a whole new C2 to work on my current pen test assignment. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, okay, you know what? Today wasn't such a bad day, because me going through and sucking it up for all the challenges I've had for this particular op is totally worth it for them to have these awesome days with their mom and learning lots of stuff. My attention spans, right? Dude, so the biggest thing is, Spirit, like, just start getting off the screens a lot. That's one thing I've noticed too. Is like, especially like, hey, I have YouTube, I have TikTok, I have Facebook, I've got X on here, and it's very easy for like 20 minutes to just bam, gone, evaporate off that. So I try to make it very conscious, like, hey, I really want to go look at something right now. I have 20 minutes. Versus, let me just check something real fast. No, there's no ever real fast. They have designed those systems to be like a spider's web. Get you trapped in there, get you stuck in the amber, get you stuck in the webs. So the biggest thing I'd tell you, Spirit, is just work on that discipline of not letting the phone steal your attention. Anyway, what did he? Let me double check this real quick. So I wanted to see why he changed this to some of this stuff. So in the spirit of weeding the garden and cleaning things up, I'm relicensing the Tradecraft Garden from GPL v2 example loaders under BSD now. And so for those who have built on the previous code, I've released an update package with these materials under the BSD license. Okay. Very cool. I like this. I really can't wait to start working on this some more. I've only looked at it a little bit, but anyway. Let me take a quick peek at this one. So this was one about breaking communications with, there we go. Breaking the Defender communication endpoint with the cloud. So what they're talking about is they're not going to turn off Defender. What they're going to do is they've got Defender on Windows has a communications channel up to Microsoft, obviously. What they're talking about is breaking that communications channel in there. So that way, if you do trigger alerts, they're not being reported up. Let's see. Inspect network traffic between Defender and the endpoints and cloud services. Identified some issues, including an authentication bypass, data and command spoofing, information disclosures, ability to upload malicious files to investigation packages destined for security analysts. Oh, that's actually really interesting. Okay. Hey. Snoop, what's up, man? Snoop in the house. Thanks for coming online, brother. That's exactly what my brain tells me. Let me check this out real fast, and I'll get back to work after that. And the next thing I know, I've been scrolling the feed for 20 minutes. Dude, I've fallen into the same trap too, still. But one thing I find that helps is when I have an interesting problem to work on. If I'm working on something I really don't want to be working on, it's a lot easier to just reach for that phone and get my little dopamine. No. The best way is, like I said, I put my phone purposely face down to do two things. One, turn on do not disturb mode on my phone so it's not dinging at me. And two, that way it's a visual reminder to me like, hey, you're in focus mode. You shouldn't be touching me. No touchy. Hey, Noibu, what's up, man? Is that like tradecraft you need for 0 in days? Not exactly, Cypher. So that tradecraft was more for like post-exploitation. So different kind of tradecraft. You'd usually put everything like that for tradecraft for like finding 0 days and end days. You wouldn't typically refer to those as tradecraft. You'd refer to those as like vulnerability research methods. Just if you wanted to split hairs in there. Hope everything's well with you. Snoop, I'm having a pretty good day, man. I had a beatdown of a day, but then my kids told me what a good day they had, and I was like, okay, you know what? It was a good day then. Their good day makes my day good. Oh, the disabling the communications and telemetry. Not really, because you got to think that's all part of just the exploitation chain. It depends on kind of what you're going for too, because you got to remember, not every exploit is made equally. They all have different outcomes. They all have different preconditions. they're kind of like their own. Each exploit is kind of like its own species. Even if a couple of them look very similar, they have more or less distinct differences to them. So some of them like have, 10 preconditions, so it's a really hard case to actually pull off. Or some of them might have, 20 preconditions, but 19 of those are default settings. And so those 19 default settings just happen to be there. Or some of them might just have one precondition, be online, a la, Eternal Blue. What am I using to show the MP3 file on the stream? So that is a plugin for OBS called Tuna. Tuna OBS plugin. Right here. And here, I'll drop a link to it here in the chat. But Tuna, it takes a little bit getting used to and understanding what it's doing. But essentially what Tuna will do is as it reads through the files from the list, it writes it to a file on disk. And then this text down here is just reading that file, and I formatted it nice into like a cool pseudo command prompt looking thing. I might change it. I might put a little background behind it, but I've got it right there. Yeah, no problem, Snoop. Eventually, I think also I'm probably going to try and create something for the chat that's going to be TOS breaking. So I'm not going to talk about it on stream, but I'm thinking about something. I'll let y'all know. What was your first day like as a red teamer? Was it intimidating? I'll tell you, actually, Manny. So my very first day was not really intimidating, but it was interesting.
Bullshit, I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
You can absolutely hear me, Cesarius. You guys love to abuse Arlie Ermy in the chat here. I vibe coded a whole interface with HTML source and it was overkill. I thought about doing the same thing, Snoop. All right, so Manny asked, what was the first day like as a red teamer and was it intimidating? It was not, and I'm going to contrast that in two different examples. So I've only worked for 2 offensive security teams. I worked for my last one for 6 years. I've worked for this one for a little over a year. So I've been doing this for about 7 years now. Getting close to 8 years, really. But the first day, I was excited. I came in and basically onboarded the first half of the day and then went to lunch with my team and then came back and immediately started working on a web app assessment. So that was about it. And then basically just took off from there. And they thought that I was actually going to need like a lot of hand holding or something. They really just wanted me to start and figure out like where I was having trouble so they could help me. I ended up just completing the entire web app assessment and just kind of went from there, even though I didn't really like web apps, but I was excited because at that time I still kind of did. I hadn't been beaten down by having done hundreds of them. So I kind of enjoyed that there. Now, that company, we had some really weird measurable metrics for how well the penetration testing team was doing. So when I left there and I joined my current company about a year ago, I actually started having like massive anxiety because I had not been billable for 6 weeks. And so they had me doing stuff. Don't get me wrong. I was working on things. I was becoming familiar with their policies and procedures and doing onboarding. So I was doing things, but I wasn't billable, right? I wasn't earning money from clients. And actually, I got massive anxiety about it. I was worried. I told my wife, I was like, oh God, I think they've overhired. I haven't done any billables for 6 weeks and then they're going to fire me. And I just really like it here. And this sucks. And finally, I had to calm myself down. I had to get lizard brain under control and realize that, oh, this is how a properly run company does things. So all the shops are different, how they work with stuff and things like that. But yeah, it was, in fact, I just started like having a little bit of a, like breaking out in sweat thinking about that time period where I wasn't billable for 6 weeks. Like you can see it. Like I started breaking out thinking about that. I legit got anxiety because I wasn't billable for more than a week. If you were not billable for 2 weeks, like questions started getting asked at my last job. So I mentioned that I transitioned from an electrician to an IT cybersecurity and graduated in August. Yeah, Norby, you did tell me about that. So how huge of a deal is it if I'm not landing an entry-level job and the cap the gap keeps getting larger. So, I mean, the gap is not necessarily always getting larger. The thing I tell people about when you're trying to break into offensive security is, and I was explaining that actually to my client today, because we're doing stuff and we're working with them. Let me lay a little bit of the groundwork, and this is a very common scenario. We have our security team that we're working with at the client. The client went through and they identified someone that we're going to call the trusted executor or the seated access user. So that is a user that we have prepared a command and control payload to to execute on their machine. So they are our initial infection point into the network. So when that happens, a lot of times we can just send them a payload and they can run it and boom, we're off to the races. This is not one of those clients though. This client has a lot of bells and whistles. So what we did is we spent a lot of time sitting down, talking over a video call, going over different pieces of information, checking things in Windows, checking things in the network. We were doing sysadmin work so we could get in there and do cyber hooligan stuff. So I really encourage people who are in the offensive security area, go through and continue doing your personal development in the administrative side, because really what we're doing is weaponized system administration or malicious system administration. Yeah, that's how one of my buddies used to put it. We're going through and I'm changing the spark plugs in the car. Instead of going under the hood like a regular mechanic, I'm going in through the tailpipe. Giggity. So I'm about to take a job as a CS specialist for a gov contractor, and that would give me some anxiety. I think you'll be good, Snoop. Just sitting there, learn what you can. Try to like be the sponge, suck up stuff. Realize that chances are more than likely at that position, they're not going to love you. You're not really going to be family, but don't let that stop you from helping folks. And then realize, hey, when you might have outgrown the position, right? If you've gotten to the point where your skill set and the task that you're doing, you don't like them or they're not, compensating you fairly, then that's kind of when you go move on. I always caution people that, hey, don't move on until the next thing's lined up. That's just good practice. Unless it is becoming actively toxic to be there, like it's severely adversely affecting your health. I had that happen at the last job, and there was a time when I was working quite literally like 18 hours a day, still taking care of my kids. Honey Badger was only like a year old at the time, so I was trying to help take care of him, take care of my wife, because she was still recovering from everything, and she was still working too. So I mean, it was just crazy all the way around. And my health has still not fully recovered from that. I still am not up to the point I was when those 18-hour work days happened. I've been a Fed for 25 years, so glad you reminded me that I'm not family. The Fed almost always family feeling. Yeah. I love the people I work with. Don't get me wrong. But I also have to remember that the company has its own goals and usually does not give a crap about me. This is probably the first company I've worked at where the people above actually do give a crap about me. And it came through a lot whenever, when my son passed away in March and then when my dad passed away in May. And I actually got an email from our CEO because he was doing a meeting with all the managers, and some of the challenges of like how the employees have been doing came up, and apparently my case was extreme enough to come up in that meeting. So he actually sent me an email, checking on me and seeing how I was doing. I was like, I've never had the CEO email me about anything before. So that was really good that was a really nice feeling to actually get that. All right, let's take a look here. How long is this thing here? Hold on. This is a really long one here. I'm kind of just going to skim this because I want to see what he was actually able to achieve with this. Let's see. So he's talking about like what he did in EDRs here. So solutions are complex, EDR solutions. They're complex software with large attack surfaces. Missing pieces of our blog post here. So the missing piece is the communication between the agent and the cloud. So this post is part of that research. We'll publish other findings on EDRs later at this time. I got a coworker that he loves tinkering with that stuff, like particularly the communications channel between like any program, but also especially EDRs. The only other public research I found on the topic was from Falcon Force. So they analyzed the web communication by dumping HTTP requests and responses from memory using a debugger. So it's pretty cumbersome for identifying vulnerabilities. They successfully found an authentication issue related to sending alerts. So I decided to use Burp Suite as a proxy to bypass certificate pinning by patching the validation function in memory. Okay, I figured that's kind of what he was doing is, because you gotta remember, if it's running on your computer, you could probably control it. So. Yeah, Snoop, that was, and actually before those two even, my first day at my new job, my sister passed away. So, and like, so from day one, they've been amazing and like, okay, hey, yeah, I know you're just supposed to be doing onboarding. Is there anything you need to take care of? And so like literally day one, they've had my back. Really technically day two, because I went through the first day of work and was doing onboarding and everything was hunky-dory. I was actually on stream that day because I used to stream 6 days a week, and I was on stream when I got the call and just ended the stream, ran over to go check on my sister. But so like I texted my boss that night. She's like, okay, take your time, go take care of your parents. Ugh. My professor actually told me, why not give network administration a shot since I have experience in electrical, copper, and fiber optics technology. That's not a bad idea. I mean, usually though, for networking, you're not going to deal a ton with those. You'll deal with them in some respects, right? Like, okay, hey, we need to go run some new network cable. Yeah, that happens. For the large part, a lot of the networking stuff happens, that layer, once it's set, it's pretty much done. Typically, you don't go messing with it. However, one of the cool things you could do with that, though, with your electrical experience, is you could go sub layer 1, really sub layer 2. Let's talk about it, right? Because you have either copper wires carrying it, or you've got like your fiber optic cables carrying that signal, and that's kind of important because, especially if you do any kind of like radio communications, so anything like a microwave wireless network, that's stuff that would be probably super helpful with your background. So it's not a super close connection there, Noipy, but I don't think it's a bad suggestion. I don't think so. And this is coming from a guy who I wired up a system when I was at the college working there that was, I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6, let's see, that's 35 racks because one of them was missing one. So 35 racks plus like another, I think 20 in that lab. So it was about 45 racks that we wired up, and each one had for sake of a round number, let's call it 10 connections that it needed to have to the other racks. And then each of the rows were interconnected. We had a master switch they had to be connected to. So you're talking like, it was easily 450 punch downs and running cables and stuff like that. And I think it was probably more. That's probably on the low side. But once that was done and it was done correctly, just didn't touch it. It was good. The cables don't really migrate very much. Let's see here. So what did he do here? I was going to take a quick, brief look at this. So he did a packet capture. So basically what he did is, usually these programs are using certificate pinning, meaning if it's already, to get online, it's got to talk to the primary server, right? Once it does that, it pins that certificate saying, okay, this is the certificate I'm going to use. But all that logic's running in code in memory. So you hook in, you patch that piece of code, and then bam, certificate pinning's gone. He can start intercepting it with Burp Suite. I don't know why I said that's a word. Burp Suite. So what did he find here when he was examining this? Everything goes over the web now. So the agent regularly sends a request to EDR command CNC. So if a command is available from the backend, the server returns the response. The commands are, for example, isolation, forensic collection, scan, or maybe incident response. Okay, so it's running here, but it like, you notice how it came back as a 200, but it's blank. So here's what an actual command response looks like. Incident response command. Interesting, it's got signatures on it. So the request was sent by Defender contains an authorization token and MSA device ticket. The backend completely ignores those values. Of course it does. Of course it does. So an unauthentic attacker who knows the machine ID and the tenant ID can send valid requests to this URL. So these values can be read by low privilege users on the system. So once the backend sends the command in a response, it will not send it again in subsequent requests. So the following two screenshots show burp proxy. Hold on. So I think what he's saying here is that, let's say you tripped something, but you're constantly polling for this thing here. And once it sends like a valid response, it never sends it again. It's like, okay, cool. I've sent it. I'm dumped it out of the queue. And so you don't need authorization. You don't need anything like that to go read it. So let's say they were trying to isolate a machine that you're triggering. You just have some other machine sitting off network that's constantly polling for that with their machine ID and everything else. If you knew this, I don't know how difficult it'd be to get these two pieces of information, but you basically would just be emptying the queue automatically and it would never receive the commands. All right, that's funny. Hey, Rep, what's up, dude? I got a random question for you. So our free C2, or of the free C2s, which one do you prefer in order of best to least? I prefer Mythic, obviously, number one. I really like Mythic. In fact, I'm thinking about writing some stuff for Mythic. After that, I have not actually tried Havoc. I think Havoc is really cool, though, especially considering it was written by a 19-year-old, and he was doing amazing stuff with that. Way smarter than I was at 19. So I think Havoc is really neat. But if I had to absolutely rank order them, I'd say Mythic, Sliver, and then Havoc. In that order. Just because I do actually hear people like using Sliver in some ops. I have never heard any professional offensive security folks talk about using Havoc in any way on an op. And so not trying to throw any shade at Havoc. I'm just saying that is why I've ranked him that way. Yeah, no problem, Matt. Dude, I really like Havoc, especially if you ever get the itch to like maybe build some command and control stuff. Havoc, you gotta remember, not Havoc, was it Mythic? Mythic is a framework. It gives you all the stuff to go build like your own implants, your own C2 channels. I've got a new C2 channel I'm planning on implementing because it works over Azure Blob Storage, and I kind of hate what I'm working with right now. It's a neat idea, and I think it's a really good proof of concept. It's called Loki C2, like Loki, like the Norse mythology. And it's interesting, and it is kind of working, but it's got a lot of care and feeding issues. And I decided I want to go build this in Mythic. That's what I want to do. This computer, I think this computer is about to die. What, now you need to go out? Hold on. Hang on, guys. Come here, Peaches. Come here. Come here. By the way, y'all kept asking, and I haven't had a chance to show her in a while. Here's Peaches. If you haven't seen her. This is Peaches, my loyal hacking companion. She is my little shadow. She sticks with me every time I'm just kind of sitting here in the computer. Yeah. I'm not pooping. I'm this is not a poop. This is a peach. She's a pretty peach. Okay. Hang on one sec, guys. I'll be right back because she's got to go out to the bathroom. Hang on. Come on, Peaches. I wasn't pooping. Peaches is the one pooping. Wait, there we go. I left the camera on. All right. Yeah, she's a sweetie. And what's funny is my wife is sitting right out there, right? She's just over in the living room. And she's like, why didn't Peaches come to me? I'm sitting right here. I was like, she loves you, Peaches does, but you're not her primary person. You are a secondary person. She loves you the most when I'm not here. Just the way it goes. Oh yeah. Not sponsored by Jocko. Transparent Jocko. Yet. I love that that can is just perfectly chroma green. Oh, that's hilarious. About the okay, so we were just talking about if an attacker knew the machine and tenant ID, they could just empty the command queue, and the endpoint would never receive it. Let's see. So an attacker could then upload arbitrary fake data that provides to that provided Azure Blob URI, and some of the commands, such as the isolation command, can be returned with a request to status. Nice. Okay, cool. So preventing isolation by spoofing results. So first, intercept the isolation command intended for the target host. Yeah, so he did a get, and we see the isolation command here, right? And then we spoof a response. So we send a spoof response with an already isolated to the corresponding command ID. Oh, okay, so you do actually need to give it a response for it to realize that it worked, but if you just can spoof that response... Now the question is, how secure is this response? Like, is it just a particular structure? Because he debase 64'd it right here, but there's some non-printable characters in there, so I'm curious about that. So the result becomes an unisolated device that reports it's isolated to Microsoft. Nice. That's hilarious. So the serialization format is annoying, so the easiest approach is to capture a legitimate response using a proxy and then modify it. So as of October 10th, I noticed that the requests are being throttled by the server, which was not the case in July. Interesting. I wonder if they noticed it. See, I don't know if it's a sign that I'm learning, but the more I learn the stuff, the more I feel I don't know anything. And the things that I learn keep piling up. That is absolutely a sign that you're learning, man. Because the more you learn, the more you feel like you don't know jack. You don't know jack, man. And that's the way I feel all the time. Especially like when I come through and I read these. So I've been in security pretty much, let's see, since 2015. So I started at IT in 2010. Did about 5 years of general, lots of touching everything IT work, but I started in security on the blue side in 2015. So I've been in security for 10 years. I've seen a lot, done a lot, and really I feel like I just don't know jack, because there's new stuff that I'm learning every single day. All right, so what did he do here? Let's see. Intercept the actions for authentication bypass and spoofing data. So this vulnerability was pretty similar to the previous one, so it involved a different set of actions though, like live response or automated investigation. So the intruder window on the right gets the response for the actual target and doesn't receive it. The proxy window on the left obtains an action, but it's actually a different one that's returned. So what does he got? I can't really zoom into it. Actually, there we go. Oh, that's nice. All right, so he did a GET request to... Let's see. I thought it's funny that they spelled censor. Censor? Like censor. I would have thought that would be like censor, but anyway. So they did a request to censor V1 actions, and then they get some kind of serialized information here. Oh, this is his intruder, so he was actually sending stuff to it, but what was the payload? Payload null? Oh, I guess he was just trying to, like, send a bunch of, like, recurring requests to it. I see what he's doing there. So again, there was no effective authentication. The attacker can obtain a valid, an attacker can obtain a valid Cloud R token without authentication by using the machine ID. RIP. So these actions, they got encoded using Microsoft Bond. What is that? Of course it's archived. Let's see. What is it? Well, what is it though? It just says, hey, we're not gonna talk about it. It's gotta be some kind of like serialization library. So I used a language model to write a decoder that could decode data the data as much as possible without any additional metadata. Oh, okay, interesting. So get connections list. So an investigation package is requested, so an attacker could place a similarly named malicious file within the uploaded data. So it's plausible that an analyst might open that without suspicion. Nice. Let's see. Unauthenticated incident response exclusions. What? So an authenticated user can obtain IR exclusions by sending a request to the registration endpoint. So these are not detection or prevention exclusions, but rather files and folders excluded from automated or manual incident response actions. So the organization ID required for this request can be read by any user from the registry. Nice. Let's see. It looks like you can also get like general information on the agent configuration. Oh, that's super handy though, because if they have exclusions enabled, you go make a query to this, boom, you've instantly got the exclusions list. You know right where to drop your C2 payload. Beautiful. Beautiful. So some of the things that included here is like whatever they're monitoring in the registry, driver read-write access for process lists. Let's see, driver read-only process. Nice. Dr. Reiki has popped 3 shells so far. Awesome. Thanks for the resub, man. What are we reading? So this was a guy's investigation over into, here, I'll drop a link to it for everyone. He's talking about how he was doing man in the middle for Microsoft Defender. Defender for Endpoint, I think. Hold on. I don't know where the scroll bar actually is. You know what? I got an idea. I'll just open it again. Yeah, Defender for Endpoint. And what he did is he went through and he man in the middle the C2 channel, or I almost called it the C2 channel. The channel between Defender for Endpoint and the server up in Microsoft, and he was looking at the information that's coming back and forth. He found some really awesome stuff. A lot of it boiled down to they weren't doing authentication correctly and it was completely ignored. So there's a lot of unauthenticated stuff you could do. Yeah. So one of the things he was just talking about was it was actually possible to query for the host. So if you knew something like the tenant ID and probably the machine ID, if I had to guess, you could actually go query for that host and get a list of all of its exclusions. So I'm like, perfect. Just, C2 EDR bypass on command. Excellent. Ooh, enumeration. Yeah, it's nice, dude. So I've been in computer science since 2019, but in the Fed, you get pigeonholed into so my specialties are in device and OS hardening. That's a very important field to be in, though, man. So many companies don't take their device hardening very seriously. It's really like a big jump whenever companies start actually taking that serious in there. I feel like I barely know anything outside of my wheelhouse. No, not necessarily, Snoop, because you're looking at it from one facet, right? You're looking at how do I make this system, more secure? How do I harden it? At the same time, all you have to do is flip that bad boy around. If these changes aren't there, here's where the holes exist. Now, you might have to go through and figure out, okay, well, why does that make the hole, right? And then you can start kind of poking at it and learning that perspective. Yes, figure out why the hole is there, and then poke it good. Once you've got that idea, though, you can start looking like, okay, why was this setting told to be on the hardening guide? So one of the things I actually look at a lot whenever I'm trying to go investigate a new tech stack that I'm not familiar with is the first thing I do is I go look at a real quick system admin guide so I can get an idea of the functionality and what's there. The second thing I go do is I look at a system hardening guide, because that's essentially the vendor saying, hey, here's where we didn't put in the best top tier security stuff because you still have to have it functionable, right? So I look at those two pieces of information, and 9 times out of 10, that's gonna point me right to where I need to find something that is built-in functionality I can go abuse. Oh, the damn ads. So Snoop, what I was saying is take the hardening information you've got, flip it on its head. I was like, okay, so if this made the configuration more secure, why does not having that configuration make it less secure? And then you can start investigating the security implications of that. So that's my internship going to, my internship's going to be doing desktop risk and vulnerability remediations. And those are important, dude. Especially if they don't even know the vulnerabilities there to go remediate it. So the reason I'm doing a course on how to use ServiceNow right now. Gotcha. Good old ServiceNow. All right, so let me see what he's doing with this real quick. So enumeration done by Defender for Endpoint. So an investigation was previously triggered on a compromised host. The resulting data package might still be available on the file system and readable by any user. Oh. Is that so? Compressed collected data. So if we look at this, what this is a basically like an ACL of who can access this directory. So it looks like it's in program data, Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection temp compressed collection. So on this folder, he's looking at who has access to it. And if we look at built-in users, you have I, R, and X. Which means I believe you have, I forget what the I is, but R and X means you have read and execute permissions on it. Yeah, built-in users, I, R, and X. I had to remember exactly, it's been so long since I get to remember and always go look up what these actually mean. Let's see, so this contains various types of information that could be valuable to an attacker, like any auto runs or installed programs or network connections. Ooh, nice. Very cool. So a lot of this stuff boiled down to, one, not good file handling permissions, but two, really, they just didn't do, They didn't do authentication properly to the DFE API. Hang on one sec, guys. Had to get my water. So water. Let's see. The Holic. Not any old Holic. The Holic. What's up, man? Thanks for coming online. Welcome in, brother. Hope everybody's having an absolutely wondiferous Wednesday. Let's see. What else do we have in here? Were there any other news articles? Actually, yes. So there was one called The Near Return of the King. So the account takeover using the bad successor technique. So bad successor, just to recap for everybody here, this had to do with GMSA accounts in Azure tenants. And those are group managed service accounts, if I remember correctly. But there was a flaw with it. It's been remediated where if you had access to a GMSA account and a Windows 2022 or 2025 domain controller, one that was of a certain level, you could basically take over everything. There was a really bad privilege escalation. Microsoft came in and patched it, but it looks like Logan here has found out that they didn't quite get the patch. This is water as far as you're concerned, Gumby, and nobody can prove otherwise. Let's see. All right, let's look at the TLDR. So after Microsoft patch Yuval Gordon's bad successor Privest technique, bad successor returned with another blog from Yuval, briefly mentioning to the community that attackers can still abuse. Oh, I had it wrong. Is DMSA. I thought it was the GMSA accounts. The DMSAs to take over any object where they have a write primitive. So this mention did not gather significant attention from the community, leaving an operational gap for DMSA related tooling and attention. So this blog dives into why DMSA abuse is still a problem, the release of a new beacon object file, which we've got right here. We're going to take a look at that too. Labeled bad takeover, plus additions to sharp successor, and all to show that bad successor's impact as a technique not a vulnerability, will still hold a lasting effect. Yes. Return of the King. So there's some heavy exposition around surrounding the context of the after-patch DMSA abuse and how Yuval's new technique relates to the previous discretionary access control list and those related attack vectors. So I recommend reading through that. But if you don't and you want to skip to the practical examples, jump to after-patch practical examples to DMSA weaponization. Always get your history, because history informs the present. Get boffed. Yeah, right? All right, so for some background, a few months ago in May, security researcher from Akamai named Yuval Gordon, I'm saying that right, Yuval Gordon released a blog post titled Bad Successor Abusing DMSA for Privilege Escalation in Active Directory. Let's see. I thought this was an Azure bug. I'm getting my wires all crossed. Speaking of not knowing anything, essentially turning the cybersecurity community on its head. So Yuval's post announced that he found a novel AD privilege escalation vulnerability within Windows Server 2025, which was pre-released at the time, which could take you from a low priv user to domain admin privileges with the only prerequisite being create all child objects or the create child edge over an OU. That's pretty bad. So this essentially broke the internet. My coworker Garrett Foster, or as he put it, and it went viral on all social media outlets and InfoSec community. It effectively signaled that special object type that Microsoft created specifically for additional security restrictions on managed service accounts is practically made the complete opposite happen, allowing any user with control over that special object to compromise the entire Active Directory domain. Beautiful. Hey, Bobby, what's up, man? Yes, we're in the home stretch for the week. Let's get some. I wish we were in less of a home stretch for the week because I'm still working on getting a stable connection into my client's environment. They've got, and it's not just the client's environment. Let me preface that. It's a very special client. We're doing a lot of extra new things with them. So it's very cool in that respect, but also we're doing cool new things with them. So it's a lot of growing and learning pains. That's why I tell people, if you like security, but you don't like the cat and mouse game, security might be more of a hobby for you than it should be like a profession or a career, because the cat and mouse game and the constant learning and refining, it's nonstop in security.
I'm back, baby.
I love that sound. All right. So this post quickly started fanning flames of controversy online over public offensive security research disclosures. I remember that Yuval was getting flamed hard about that. But it's like, hey, I don't think Microsoft was moving on it. I think they said it was a non-issue. It's a feature kind of thing. And if I remember correctly, Yuval just said, okay, fine, I'm just going to release it to the world and they can decide if it's a feature. Additionally, something else occurred. So because of the way the community was informed of the technique by Yuval, large groups of people united in expanding the technique with the public proof of concept tool and utilities to demonstrate impact to the defenders, along with defensive recommendations to help organizations manage their risk. So this is the second half of whenever people would like, don't release proof of concepts, it's bad, and don't release offensive tooling, it's bad. Yeah, the other part that they don't remember from that is that if you don't have it, you don't know how to defend against it. If you've never been exposed to it, if you can't go run that stuff in your environment, how are you gonna know what to look for? So whenever a lot of these proof of concepts come out, probably 9 times out of 10, they've got detection noises with them. They say, hey, by the way, you look at these logs, you look at these events. If you start seeing these things happen, that indicates that this thing has been abused and bad stuff's probably happening in your network. Yes, they do make those noises fall. So Yuval released his blog essentially saying, here's the technique, I'm making you aware of it, and here's a public repo containing a scanner to help mitigate the attack in corporate environments. But did not release the Akamai internal PowerShell proof of concept for exploiting it. So this method of releasing instantly ignited the community's curiosity in understanding the specifics of the attack and how they might be able to replicate the technique from a black box perspective to fully operationally weaponize it. Which is one of the things I like doing. I like looking at interesting research and trying to weaponize it. It's one of my favorite things. So among the folks at SpectreOps who decided to jump on the bandwagon and improve to provide meaningful DMSA-related contributions included me, of course, providing an offensive .NET proof of concept attack I called Sharp Successor, and an in-memory or on-host execution for C2, just because Microsoft Java makes the most sense to my smooth brain. I love that he called .NET Microsoft Java. Excellent, excellent. Top points there, Logan. Jim Sequoia also produced an absolutely amazing detailed blog titled Understanding and Mitigating Bad Successor for an incredible defensive perspective, showing off his add bad success for OU deny access control entry. That's what ACE is. Utility. So this script can be used for a wide scale mitigation of this dangerous technique for defenders to protect their corporate Active Directory environments. And see, this is the part that everybody who's like, don't release offensive tooling, it's bad, it's unethical, it's terrible. The thing they don't realize is that there's defenders out there that can then use that to build defensive measures. It's just like an immune system, right? You're not going to be able to defend against something you've never been exposed to. Initial access is always a pain for engagements. And no doubt, yeah, you really got to love the grind sometimes in this field. I do love the grind. So I'll give you all a quick peek into the day of the life of this engagement. So Friday, because of our... Was it Friday? Yes, it was Friday. Because we're doing the deployment of our own C2 infrastructure in a different and very unique way, something we've never done before, we ran into an issue and it took us 5 hours of troubleshooting just to find out that it was literally an NFT table that was blocking it. And it's because there were several hops and layers to the C2 infrastructure. And finally, after we found another way of diagnosing it, we realized, oh, here's what the problem is. What could it be? It's a freaking firewall rule. Something that should have been handled automatically, but because of the way we were doing things, that automatic rule didn't trip. And that was beat down, but learned very important lessons from that. The same thing happened again today. We started realizing that, okay, cool, we failed in a spectacular way, but we learned new things. So now we're going to take this new knowledge and we're going to build a different way to achieve the objective. And we've pretty much got it too. I'm probably going to put together a YouTube video on Loki C2 and I'll throw that up because I think it's very interesting what it's doing, but I'm actually going to do it in two parts because I don't particularly like Loki C2. Now, it was written by a fellow who's over at IBM X-Force Red. Those guys are very smart, big galaxy brains over there. But hackers don't tend to be the best UI people and tend to literally make hacky code. Go figure. And Loki is a bit hacky. So I like the idea and I like the implementation of Loki. I don't like using Loki. So I've got an idea for part 2 that I'm going to leave as a little bit of a surprise. But I'm going to make that a 2-part video where the first part is explaining it and understanding it and how you can operationalize it. And the second part is going to be like the better version of it. Try and fail until we succeed. Damn right, agent. It's painful, but that's always where you get the great lessons and experiences. Exactly. If a lesson... It's funny you mentioned that, Bobby, because I had a thought about this. Hey, Zen, what's up, man? And Envic, Bitband, thank you for coming online. Welcome in, man. Hope you're all having a great Wednesday. So I was thinking about that, Bobby. Think about the number one thing that has reduced the pain of learning in the last, let's say, 4 years. Really? What's that? Large language models, AI interfaces, ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, all those. So what's the problem with that? You should be thinking, okay, great. The pain of learning something has been decreased. The problem is dosing. Think of it like medicine, right? Medicine doesn't work like, more of a good thing isn't always a good thing. There's a proper amount you want to have in there. And I think people are taking it unbalanced, right? They're using it and it's reducing the pain of learning, especially when, and I do this too, sometimes on non-critical systems. Like if I'm just trying to get an example of something working, yeah, I'll throw the code up in Claude, I'll throw the error up in Claude and be like, hey, what's going on here? And if I don't really care to understand the workings of it, yeah, that works out great. The problem is if you do that every single time, you have completely removed the pain of growth. Growth is painful, don't get me wrong. It is. And that pain is what helps you remember it. And that pain is what helps make you better and makes you think about it. So when you completely abstract that away by completely becoming dependent on AI systems, you don't learn. You just learn how to use the AI system. what song is this? I think this is one. Emancipation. All right, this is another one that's got to go off the list. So, by the way, guys, there's a bunch of new background music going on, and it was a huge dump thanks to Bob on here, but some of these songs are not so great for background music. So, I'm making a list of which ones to take off. So, like this one, not that great of a background song. So, we're going to skip that one. Doop. Critical thinking skills remain paramount and necessary to reason out and deduce real solutions. I agree, man. So we do need the pain of learning depending on if it's germane to or extraneous learning. So Invik, I'll give you an example. There's in the program we're working on the weekends, our little CTF playing hacking bot. There's exactly 2 pieces of code in there that had AI assistance in writing. And it was after I struggled with them. The first one is 0 AI code written. I think it was Grok, actually propose a solution that was hot garbage, but the structure of it was correct. So I took the structure and I coded it myself. The other piece that's working pretty well, but it's over-engineered, especially great, is again, something that I'm going to go probably rewrite. And that part I didn't really like, and I understand what it's doing and I like what it's doing, but it was like way over engineered. But I only went to that extreme after I struggled with it for many hours. So I had put in the pain, and then now as part of my learning, I needed to make the pain worth something. So it was worth the knowledge of going through and getting that information to it. I did the same thing when I was approaching my math degree in university. I had all the answers at my disposal. So I approached them in one of 2 ways. One was I went and I reverse engineered the answer. I was like, okay, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? And I broke down the answer, and I did not just copy it down. I understood what it was doing by analyzing it. So I had the pain of going through and reversing all those equations out. Or I struggled with it and then would go check my answer against it. And if it wasn't correct, then I would go struggle with it again and work through it until finally maybe I had to go through and do the reverse engineering method. But that was how I learned the math, was by actively approaching it kind of like I do with hacking, where I'm trying solutions and I'm testing it and I'm checking like what's the official solution to it and comparing the 2. Shoe Shot, what's up, man? My contact number is 8675309. Any area code. I've got all the area codes. If you take antibiotics, you become immune to them? I've not heard that. I mean, I think that obviously because you're not killing all the bacteria, you've got to have time for your immune system to work against it. It would make sense, though, if you just keep dosing the bacteria with it and you have a little bit that survive it. Yeah, you're going to get that antibiotic-resistant bacteria. I'm no doctor. Don't take medical advice from me. I'm just thinking through things logically. Let's see. Have you worked with DFDs? I started learning about them at uni, and they look like schematics on AC units. I am not familiar. What is a DFD, Zen? I'm not familiar with that acronym, and I live in an acronym soup every day. I was working with a realtor to help find me a place in Pensacola. So every time I have an appointment on Zoom, my realtor is an hour late. I just learned that Pensacola is actually Central Time. Yeah, if you didn't know that, part of Florida, right? Not the dangly bit, the tainty bit is up there, is actually in Central Time. Jenny, I got your number. It's also a question of whether or not you enjoy and take pride in your craft or skill. So I like coding, so why don't I want to learn what I needed to do it myself? I agree, Invik. That's why I'm not trying to use a lot of AI at all whenever I'm doing the coding, because I have a lot of experience hacking and modifying code. I don't have a lot of experience building code. So to build that skill set and train my own neural network, right? I'm training my neural network when I'm working on that. I have to do it myself. I've got to be able to get feedback and response from it. All right, let's see here. All right, so we were talking about some of the... Where did he call that? Hold on. I lost my spot in here because my mouse wheel gets a little bit crazy. Where did he call it Microsoft Java? There it is. Okay, that's where we left off right there. because I was dying laughing that he called .NET Microsoft Java. Let's see. Okay, so after a significant amount of tooling and hype were generated surrounding Bad Successor, including multiple PowerShell and Python and .NET related tools, Microsoft announced that they issued a patch for Bad Successor, which was actually, if I remember correctly, Yuval's main goal was Microsoft said it's a non-issue, it's a feature. And then people said, okay, cool, we're going to abuse the crap out of the feature. And then Microsoft said, well, maybe it's a bug, we'll fix it. Let's see. So a few months went by, hyper-attention died around Bad Successor, leaving many people in the information security to believe that it would just be another exploit which fades out of the spotlight. But then Yuval released an additional very short follow-up blog post titled Bad Successor is Dead, Long Live Bad Successor, which provided an explanation of the technique pre-patch and then the patch details post-patch and what the tradecraft attacks may still be executed against those DMSA objects in Active Directory, along with some mitigations to it, which is awesome. The blog did not generate even close to the same hyper attention as the original blog generated. To put that into perspective, the original blog post had about 158,000 impressions on just Twitter, while the other post only got about 10% of that, about 15K. So while the blog post was more of an after-action report, it briefly mentioned that the patch Microsoft issued didn't fix everything. So interestingly enough, there was a blink and you'll miss it mention of further interesting DMSA-related abuse. About 100 words out of the 1,200 in the blog post was dedicated to how the technique can still be reliably abused for account takeover by continuing to abuse of Windows Server 2025 and the new features of installing the official patch. Nice. I love it when they patch it. It's like, hey, we fixed it. No, you didn't. You didn't really. Oh, DFD stands for a data flow diagram. So I know them because my uni class names analysis and design for algorithms. Gotcha. So I have never really worked with data flow diagrams unless I'm going and writing them. I haven't really analyzed them a ton. So, because my degree was in math, I've worked in IT. So I guess I've worked with them a little bit because sometimes vendors provide those, especially when you're trying to like troubleshoot network traffic flows. You need to know how they're working. But as far as like maybe like a proper data flow diagram of like, hey, this is what a program is doing in memory and handling processes, things like that, I'm not super familiar with them. I love this approach of reverse engineering and dissecting an answer as a great means to understand the solution. It's all part without simply accepting it as is. And that forces you to think step by step. Oh, hey, imagine that. Kind of like those language models were trying to emulate the human brain. Exactly. Exactly. That was why when I wrote the language model blog post, I was trying very hard to make it demystified, because a lot of people think the language models are making these basically that they are thinking machines, but they're not really. They really are just imitations, and there's a very easy to understand means as to how they're doing it. All right. Let's see. So Logan is saying, I did not understand the gravity of the new attack vector or how this new attack worked, if I'm completely honest, until I was scrolling social media one day and I saw a reply from Yuval. So the factor which allowed the whole situation to click in my mind was the reply saying the minimum requirement is to have a write property on the MSDS superseded management account link and the MSDS superseded service account state on the target object. So then I went back to the previous after patch blog post and started to understand that with a generic write or write property to the target principal LDAP attributes, along with create child over an OU with at least one server 2025 domain controller. This is what I was talking about earlier about, hey, different techniques have different requirements to it. Some are extensive, some are kind of small. This one's a bit deep, just because it's so many layers that you have to approach it from. It allows a fourth method of account takeover, along with using role-based constraint delegations or shadow credentials, or using escalation 14 explicit strong certificate mappings. Ooh, interesting. So with this mention not generating what I feel like is an appropriate attention, I decided to look into it thoroughly, break it down while modifying my existing tools and creating new ones along the journey. The real friends were the buffs we created along the way. So you're probably thinking, if I have write permissions over the target object property, of course I can take it over, right? Not exactly. Discretionary access control list abuse is one of the most common ways to escalate to domain administrator privileges in an Active Directory environment. So it's the entire reason SpectreOps' mainline product Bloodhound exists in the first place, allowing defenders to simulate attacks to track down misconfigured permission sets, which will likely lead to a privilege escalation or a domain compromise, and fix them before an active breach. So you'll be surprised how many AD environments have permission sets such as generic write that, when chained together, will lead to taking over any of the tier 0 assets. By the way, if you don't know what a tier 0 asset is, it basically means once you get to that, you're pretty much in the end game. You're in the end zone. It's a small step to just taking over the entire domain. That's what a tier 0 asset is. So for example, domain controllers would be tier 0 assets. If you had something with unconstrained delegation on it that a lot of users were accessing, that would be a tier 0 object. Something that maybe was an account with a huge permission set or any critical permission set, that would be considered a tier 0 asset. But if you have these generic write permissions, generic write or write permissions on that object, and you wish to take it over an Active Directory, all the methods for actually impersonating the target object all have different environmental requirements. So for example, for the latter two account takeover mechanisms using Shadow Creds or ESC14, the target environment has to have an Active Directory certificate services. Yeah. So if they don't have ADCS, you can't use Shadow Creds. Now, you do usually see, like in larger companies, you see ADCS, but if it's a smaller company, they don't have Active Directory certificate services, then Shadow Creds are out the window because it's using a certificate that you implant on the LDAP object. Got that NT auth level, bro. That's right. So installation operation, that's in the current domain. In addition to write permissions, you have to actually map authentication to the MSDS key credential link and the alt security identities attribute values on that target object for the attack. So additionally, role-based constraint delegation works only on targets which hold a currently filled service principal name attribute for being able to use the S4U methods of Kerberos delegation, usually allowing it to take over a computer account which have associated services on material hosts for adversaries to delegate to. So by the way, if you're not familiar with role-based constrained delegation, there's usually like 3 flavors of delegating your tickets in Kerberos and like Active Directory. I almost said in Kerberos, but you're delegating your Kerberos ticket in Active Directory. The first one was unconstrained delegation. So unconstrained delegation was literally this server says I have unfettered access to impersonate anybody, and what you would do is that computer or that user would get a copy of their ticket, their Kerberos ticket, the one that identifies them, forward it over to that computer, and then that computer is allowed to keep that copy of it. That was unconstrained delegation. The next one after that was constrained delegation. And I forget all the requirements for that because you don't usually see it very much.
You need a drink.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But the other one you see pretty frequently is role-based constrained delegation. And this actually gets configured like on the target computer. And it says, okay, this account can access this service principal name on my system. And then because of some other Kerberos shenanigans, you can usually expand that access outside of that. So actually role-based constrained delegation is the one that I probably personally have used the most in Active Directory. She already left Gumby, otherwise I would tell her hi. Let's see. So what that means in our target environment, if we don't have ADCS installed and operational, 2 of those 3 account takeover mechanisms aren't possible. So in addition to that, if you're targeting a user account instead of a computer for a takeover, there's not a single account takeover mechanism for an adversarial perspective which could allow arbitrary takeover through a property right access if ADCS is not installed and the principal is a user object. So again, is it a user versus a computer object? So it's especially true considering that to have the ability to use forced password change to reset a target's password, you're required to have all extended rights on that system. So it's possible, or so isn't possible for that generic write edge. So even with all the other restrictions and options that don't fit due to the target environment, there's still other options to take over the user account, just less likely in a hardened environment. See, what did we talk about? We were just talking about that. Hardening environments is a crucial step, but also you can turn it on its head and realize, okay, cool, this is how it's hardened. Then if it's missing that, here's how it's weakened. So it's possible to utilize write access to a SPN or to a user account control attribute and make the account Kerberoastable or ASRep roastable. Basically meaning like, hey, if you have these primitives on this system, you can essentially try to get a copy of their password and crack it offline. So then request it. It's not technically a copy of their password. Just roll with me. So you can then request a ticket, crack it offline. The issue with this technique is that it isn't. It was basically, if you have a good password policy, like with a hardened environment, it's significantly hard to crack those passwords. Which is why I was so interested that when we were reading about, I think it was last week or the week before, that congressman was roasting Microsoft about things being Kerber roastable. He was like, this shouldn't have been in there and yada, yada, yada. It's like, he's missing the key point. It wasn't the fact that it was Kerber roastable. It's the fact that these companies were using crap passwords and the passwords were weak and easy to crack offline when you did Kerber roasting. I've had plenty of instances where I have been able to Kerber roast an account, but I wasn't able to crack it because it was sufficiently complex. And I had access to a beefy cracking rig. It had 8 NVIDIA Titan Vs in it. Which was basically the equivalent of now having like 4 RTX 5090s in there. Because we built this thing, in like 2020, I think. So we built it quite a while ago. So you're fast forward 5 years, yeah, the computing's gotten faster. But still, imagine having 4 5090 cards cracking nonstop. That's what the equivalent to the cracking power we had. Let's see. So bad successor here allows account takeover with a generic right or right property on the user account when ADCS is not installed in the target environment. But it also does have its own restrictions. So for bad successor to work, we have 3 main requirements. We need to be able to create a child over an organizational unit. That's an OU. We had to have a generic right or a right property over a target, or these 2 particular keys. MSDS superseded management account link or MSDS superseded service account state. So those 2 attributes, you got to have some ability to write to them. And you have to have at least a single Windows 2025 domain controller. Because this isn't supported on the other versions of Windows operating systems, as far as domain controllers are concerned. I thought big companies use password generation, change them monthly. I mean, for certain things, yes. Typically, Zen, you're only going to see a Kerber roastable account or, pretty much. ASRep is a little bit different story, but a Kerber roastable account, you're typically only going to see that on something like a service account, something where you don't rotate the password very frequently. And in that case, yeah, the IT team should be keeping that in some kind of secured, encrypted password vault, and it should be long and complex. Should. Does everybody always follow the best security practices? Obviously not, or I wouldn't have a job. All right, Agent. Hey, have a good night, man. Thanks for stopping in, brother. Appreciate you. Always good to see you. Well, see your name in chat, but you know what I mean, boo. Let's see. Oh, let's take a look at this diagram here real quick. So we have a compromised workstation. We've got some low privileged user. This user, for some reason, has create child permissions on an OU, and then has generic right to basically gets generic right to a domain administrator and then full control over the domain. Basically by abusing that DMSA. Let's see. Walking the keyboard produces long random passwords, right? Not exactly because people tend to suck at randomness. So if you hadn't seen this, actually, hang on. Let's see. QWERTY keyboard. So there was a really bad habit that a lot of IT administrators had back in the day where, see if I can open this up real big here. Let's see. Here we go. Boop. So if we look at a QWERTY keyboard, right? I was talking to a buddy and he said they just remembered numbers for their passwords. I'm like, what do you mean? And basically, if the password was, let's say, 157, then what they would do is they'd go 1 QAZ 5 TGB 7 UJM. That was their password system right here. So once that kind of became common knowledge, this was many years ago, like maybe 10 years ago. Of course, some aspiring nerd went through and just brute forced all the combinations of that and put it into a password dictionary. That's right. QWERTY 1 2 3 4 5. Bang. So yeah, no, people kind of suck at choosing random passwords. Let's see. So scarily enough, the least likely requirement as of right now is that there's not enough Windows Server 2025 DCs. Yeah, I think that's funny. Which is going to pretty obviously going to change in the near future as basically system administrators bring new DCs online. In a Bloodhound Basics post, Martin Sohn, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Sohn, showcased some of the analysis on all the SpectreOps cited Bloodhound enterprise environments, mentioning that every single environment SpectreOps had data on had non-tier 0 objects, which had the capability for bad successor to be abused, basically that create child on an OU. This means that once Windows Server 2025 is more established, account takeover will be possible with that common write access about 9 out of 10 times. RIP. So this is mostly possible because create child over an OU is staggeringly common and will allow adversaries to perform routine account takeover with a completely separate set of requirements than the previous techniques. So this makes account takeovers across the board significantly more likely as time goes on, allowing attackers more options and less focus on ADCS for performing account takeovers on objects. Organizations not subscribed to Bloodhound Enterprise deploying Server 2025 domain controllers. I'm in danger. Check out the XKCD on password strength. I think I remember that one. It's been a long time. Let's see. XKCD password complexity. I think that was the one. Oh, it was password strength. Yeah. Yeah, Kratos battery staple. Now, this actually sounds like I remember after this one came out, because I've got a lot of buddies who are real big into password hash cracking. They actually went through and found out that, again, people kind of suck at choosing random words. And so, yeah, this idea was good, but it was like kind of like good intentions fairy. It sounded good, but really wasn't all that fantabulous. So now they're not saying that you couldn't do this, because there's other ways you can go through and make this a little bit more secure if you remember like the base words in here. But this is just comparing it like if you were to do a raw brute force. That typically doesn't happen. In fact, the only place I can think that password brute forcing happens on like a true brute force, right? Where you're sitting there and you're like trying all the combinations, is like on NTLM hashes or NTLM v2 hashes even. Because the old hash cracking rig we had at my last job, we called it Cthulhu, the destroyer of hashes. It was actually possible to go through and brute force every password combination on Windows hashes up to like length 8, and that only took like 24 hours. And that broke a staggering amount. Staggering amount. How many we would find like up to like length 8 and below. Like with Wi-Fi password brute forcing, even then, you might see a little bit for that, but actually WPA2 is much harder to crack than, say, like an NTLM hash or an NTLM v2 hash. It's majorly harder to crack. And actually, last time I checked, I hadn't found any good methods for like capturing and cracking WPA3. WPA3 is incredibly secure last time I looked at it. I'm hoping. I'm torn. I don't know if I want it to be crappy so I can go break it, or if I want it to be secure so I can use it. I'm conflicted. I think even connecting random dictionary words in that way would be quite challenging for Hashcat. What you do, Ken, is you would actually just take a list of, because there's ranked lists of words that say like, hey, these are the most common words. You start with that and you take like the top 80% of like the most common words, or even heck, even the top 20%. And then you mutate those into a words list. And yeah, it's going to be a chunky words list, but you got to remember these computers are cracking sometimes in the terms of like giga hashes, right? Like a billion hashes a second. So it's not really that kind of crazy. I want both. I want to be secure and I want to be able to break it. I know, right? Let's see. All right, so the post-patch practical example for DMSA weaponization. So pretty much with little to no attention being focused on what this technique entails for the future of Active Directory, I decided I would write this blog post to explain the technique and why it's important. So I not only modified my already present .NET utility Sharp successor to work properly after the patch, I also created a beacon object file, buff it up, to additionally operationalize/weaponize this technique for red team operators. So bad takeover is a complete rewrite of the Sharp successor in C using native Windows LDAP APIs to create a weaponized DMSA object to execute over the C2. So this means I have officially learned how to write a proper beacon object file since my last SpectreOps blog post on relaying low privilege users to LDAP. Awesome. Screenshot from the last article documenting my skills could be found below. A BOF is the best and least detectable way to initiate this request to prevent requirements of .NET assembly execution. However, I cannot write BOFs. It took many hours of working on this to discover I cannot write BOFs. Therefore, I wrote a few lines of usable .NET to perform this action. I am dabbling with learning how to write BOFs. Have you tried it? It seems like it would be a combinatorial explosion. Oh yeah, dude. Sometimes the word lists, and then when you start mutating them even more with word lists. So if you've ever done password cracking, Hashcat will take in a word list, but it'll also take in a mutation rule list. Like maybe go through and try to like put certain characters as uppercase, append certain special characters to the password. All sorts of mutations into it. So the things you're cracking your potential what are they called? Your input word list or your overall inputs to what can potentially be cracked gets really chunky. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely does can. But yeah, at the same time, if you target like those high probability ones, you can go through and crack them, and you have a good chance of cracking them. So one of the things I used to do whenever I did a lot of password cracking assessments is I would go through and I would, after I dumped all the hashes out of a client's environment, I'd go through and I would attempt cracking them. And then I would give them a probability range that says, hey, basically, here's how skilled your attacker has to be or how many resources they've got to have in terms of password cracking to be able to compromise this many accounts in your environment. So it was this nice little graph and it said, hey, here's where things are going. If this attacker could only crack successfully like up to link 6, so a very unsophisticated attacker, they could still recover like 30% of your password hashes. So that's really bad. Or hey, they'd only be able to get like 2%. But as it increased, because we had really good cracking hardware and we could have really chunky word lists and rule lists, as that increased, like if you had an attacker that could crack up to link 7, they could potentially compromise like 50% of your password hash, your passwords in there. So it gave them an idea of like, hey, kind of where they stand based on different types of attackers. Yeah, just doing combos of like, and not even necessarily combos of like random passwords, Gumby. Typically people base their passwords off of some kind of a word. So taking that word and then modifying it, like maybe the first or third character gets capitalized. And then maybe that they're always going to put some number and some characters at the end, right? Or some special characters. And so making rules around those ideas was what a lot of my friends focused on. Board, all I see whenever you type in your password is just stars. I see like 7 stars there. MetaMask uses 12 random English words for its recovery key phrase, even though they're all in the dictionary. I challenge you to crack it being tricky with Hashcat. 12 words is a little bit different. The example in particular was from XKCD was using 3 or 4 words because they should be simple like that. MetaMask is a different thing because it's using a key derivation algorithm. And so, yeah, that's why you're using those 12 words in there. It's a completely different scenario. It's the same, but different. Ken is usually trolling Gumby. That's his MO. And he's usually trolling with dad jokes. Where would I be? Okay, that's another one that's I've got to unfortunately drop off the list. Hang on a second. Where would I be? I'm putting these on a sticky note so it's more annoying and I can't ignore it. All right, let's see here. All right, so before, this is Logan's blog again. So before I started writing the beacon object file, I decided I would expand sharp successor to perform the technique first. Really, the only modification which was required for it to function properly after the patch was the right operation on the target object, which we were going to take over. Specifically, the superseded manage account link. So once if that attribute is written with the distinguished name attribute of the malicious DMSA and the superseded service account state, which is written with at number 2 to complete the migration process. Got it. Got it. Let's see. So Sharp Successor functions just about the exact same as it did pre-patch, just with some additional post-patch functionality. So we can utilize an OU's test OU location, an account which has a generic write access over which we want to impersonate. In this account, in this case, we're using domain admin, so our current context domain user, and the name of our malicious DMSA object. So all this creates a weaponized DMSA object for account impersonation. So here's the example of what he wrote with bad successor. So you're going to impersonate domain admin. Here is the path to the test OU account, the one that you've got permissions to create a child on. Here's the user account and the name of the DMSA. Got it. Got it. You have to attach them to the monitor right in the beginning so you don't ignore them. I've got them actually attached to the iPad down here, the one that I can't mirror to the screen anymore. By the way, I'm actually looking at something. Oh, it's over there. Otherwise, I'd show it to you. But it's a small, mini PC. Not a mini PC, but like one of the small form factor bread box style PCs. It's got a PCI expansion card in it, and right now it's running an extra NIC. I'm thinking about yanking that out and putting an Intel Arc card in there. And then what I'll do is all of the streaming accoutrements will actually be connected to that computer. And I'll have that computer connected to one monitor where I can see it and I can operate on it. But the primary computer screen will then actually be streamed to that computer. And then that computer will actually offload all the streaming using the Intel Arc processor, because it actually does a pretty good job for that. And they're fairly inexpensive. And then I can use that to do all the streams to Kick and Twitch and YouTube. Let's see. Cool. Sharp Successor. Bam. So we can utilize a ticket from our current context, which we could create with our ticket deleg, or we can dump the LSA to request a ticket under the DMSA's context using Rubius. Let's see. So our target user is our DMSA account. We do our target service. And we tell it we're using DMSA. That's right. I forgot they added DMSA functionality to Rubius. Boop. And then we just give it our ticket. Ta-da! Total streamer geek out. It is, man. Dude, the whole stream is like a geek out. Geek out about everything on here. Have fun. Enjoy the tech. Learn how to break it. Learn how to not let it control our lives. 1984 was supposed to be a warning, not a blueprint. We shouldn't sleep on the Intel Arc GPUs. They're getting very solid performance for the price point. And that's actually one thing I didn't realize, Bobby, is that at least on the YouTube side, maybe sometime in the future after they get over, whatever lawsuits are going to occur from TwitchCon, maybe Twitch will finally put in AV1 encoding, which will cut a lot of the bandwidth issues that they're having. I don't know why they haven't implemented AV1 yet. It's available over on the YouTube side. And if you're not familiar with AV1, I believe it cuts down your bandwidth by, it might be 50%. I want to say it's even more than that. But essentially, if you take, hold on, AV streaming, bandwidth compared to, I think it's H.264. Yeah, AV1 requires 30 to 50% less bandwidth than your normal H.264. Something you would usually offload with like NVENC on an NVIDIA card. So you'll be able to, I'll be able to at least cut down some of the outgoing bandwidth from to YouTube. I don't know if Kick actually supports AV1 either. I'll have to go check. Yeah, but the Intel Arcs support AV1, Gumby. I didn't realize that till I was watching Braithorn's stream. And I was trolling him in there, and he told me about that. I was like, oh. So then it instantly became a contender. Yeah, I hope AV1 gets better adoption. Just, it should be better. Anyway, all right, so once we get the DMSA ticket in memory, it'll inherit the permissions of whatever account it is set to impersonate, which in this case was our domain admin. An example of the impact of this is, hey, now you can go just start listing all the contents of the C drive on the domain controller. Everybody knows what happens when you get domain admin. So as for bad takeover, the new tool can be found over here. We're going to take a look at the beacon object file in just a second. Once you compile it, you can upload it to your favorite C2 for execution. The parameters for bad takeover are essentially the same as sharp success, for just slightly more verbose. So it takes in, if you're not familiar with how beacon object files work, what you're doing is you're actually doing like structured data and you're sending it, putting it in memory, and then the beacon object file is basically taking that as your input parameters when it's executing. So you have to specify a data type and then whatever the value is. So in this case, the data type is string, 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 string. But these could be strings, these could be integers, these could be wide chars. It just depends on how the person coded the beacon object file. So in this case, Logan decided, let's just make everything a string. So it looks like you give it, and the position also matters. They're very, the position of the data that you're sending is super important. So in this case, you'd have to send these things in this order: the target OU, the name of the DMSA to create, the security idea, the SID of your current context, the target user's distinguished name, and then the current domain. So you have to send these in that specific order. If you get them out of order, it's going to break. Let's see. So here's an example of using it with Mythic, love it, and Apollo. Good old Apollo, love it. So we can see the attacker DMSA object gets created and weaponized along with the domain admin object being written to successfully, allowing the account takeover. So just as before, we can utilize Rubius to request that ticket and impersonate the target object and be able to list the contents of the domain controller C drive. So as of now, DMSA authentication is only integrated into Rubius. So for the future, I hope to write a BOF-related Kerberos repository such as Kerberos BOF or NanoRubius to implement this change so that DMSA abuse process can be executed entirely through beacon object files for like a red teaming assessment. Nice. Nice. Now I need to go check my current target environment and see if they've got any 2025 domain controllers. Let's see if he's got any more information on the BOF here. I actually really like this song. This is like the boss music. I'm going to take a quick peek at the C code because I want to see what he did here. But honestly, it's been a long time since I did C, and I wasn't really great at it when I started. When I start doing more maldev and we start building like a malware crafter special agent, then I'll get back into C a lot more. Let's see. Yep, that looks like C code. That's exactly what it looks like. Okay, enough of that real quick. All right, I want to take a look at this Kraken hashes thing here, since we're talking so much about cracking hashes, and see what they've got going on. I think I've looked at this one before. The interface looks familiar, but then it also looks like kind of like your typical, like, you know, React style or Vue style interface here. But so I do need to run to the bathroom, guys, so we'll cover this when I get back. Be right back. All right, I'm back. We'll get the ads just a second to finish up. And Gumby, I wasn't pooping. I was far from pooping. That's German for I wasn't pooping. I was far from pooping. The music sounded like the OST made by Jasper Kidd for the Robotech invasion. It kind of did, didn't it, Zen? I saw your message just before I stepped away. Got a quick question. I'm preparing for the OSCP and about to learn pivoting. Should I learn Lagolo, NG, or Chisel? Is one preferred over the other? So the main thing you want to remember there, I'm going to call you Big Shot. I think that's the best way. Here, hold on. Let me clear all this stuff out. Clear. We'll use the Primogen laser pointer. Okay, so when it comes to pivoting, Big Shot, I don't actually have a lot of experience with Lagolo or Chisel. Typically what I do is direct port forwards through something like SSH or SOCKS. But the main thing you have to think about is where is the data going? So usually what I do, and it comes very naturally to me because I have a lot of networking experience. But let's say we've got our attacker machine here, and then we've got some kind of, let's say, compromised machine here, and then we have our target machine down here, right? So the main thing you want to think about this is you have to think about almost like a network routing problem. Is you've got to have some way to get this data to this computer, but not be handled by this computer, and just simply forward over to this target here. Or it even could just be forwarding like to an entire network in here, right? So we could have an entire network where it's able to forward this traffic to anything arbitrarily in there. So usually what I would do is if I'm operating over like a C2, then I'm going to have a SOCKS proxy running on here. And then I'm going to be using something like proxy chains on this side. Proxy chains. I wish I could get the damn iPad back up and working. If I had to choose between the two of them, I have not messed with Lagolo very much, but the little bit I did mess with Chisel, I liked what Chisel was doing. So I would say I'm going to recommend Chisel just out of the chance that I've had experience with it. But for the most part, this is usually how I'm doing it. Or if I'm doing this maybe over like just SSH in here, that would be another way that I'd go out doing it. Lagolo is great for CTFs, but you should practice touching disk as little as possible for actual offensive engagements. Yeah, Ford, I agree. Which is why I don't usually use Lagolo, because Lagolo, you've got to serve it and
Bullshit, I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
Ben DeLuise, what's up, man? With Lagolo, you've got a server-client architecture, but if you're using a C2, you've already got the client. It's usually built into the C2 agent. So that's why I don't typically use Lagolo. I typically stick to something like Chisel. If I would had to pick between the two. Typically, I'm just doing something either, like I said, with some kind of SOCKS proxy on like a C2 agent, or using just straight up SSH. Because you can use SSH with a TAC capital D option, and then you just give it whatever the port number is here. Port. And then that makes a SOCKS proxy on this computer, and it forwards all that traffic out this computer here. So I try to live off the land as much as possible. All right, what is this Kraken hashes thing? So I've been using SSH for all the labs, but I'm not sure what the hype about Chisel or Lagolo NG is. So the hype is typically because people want shiny object instead of learning the reproducible object. And I always try to look at it too. Don't get me wrong, I love the shiny object too, but also I tend to look at things from a living off the land perspective, and SSH has that. And most of the times people don't go through and harden their SSH configs to stop stuff like port forwarding or like SOCKS forwarding in their SSH server configs. And so if it's there, I'm just going to go use it. And like Ford was saying, trying to do something with, like trying to use something where you're trying to touch disk as least as possible, that's also super helpful. You go get onto a system and you go drop a Lagolo client in there. It's, a little bit different story. Let's see. Wreath network on TryHack me is really good at learning pivoting. Let me go look that up real quick. Because eventually we will have... eventually I do want to have the ability for HackBot to be able to handle pivoting in there. Oh, very nice. Okay, so you've just got two systems here that you're going to try to pivot through. And this one, they're doing it with Empire. Empire actually got a lot of second life to it. Let's see. Topics are going to be covered is code analysis in Python and PHP, locating and modifying a public exploit. Ooh, this might be a nice one. Maybe not the second one that I want to do with HackBot, but I think this would be a good one as a future test example. I gusta. All right. We still have a long way to go on RootMe though, because we still need to. We haven't even started the post-exploitation agent yet, and the post-exploitation agent has to have all the functionality to handle Mythic, and it's got to have the ability to handle the functionality of just understanding like how to do the privilege escalation and stuff like that. You end up with a line of like 9 devices at the end. What? Okay, that's gonna be way in the future then. Well, definitely at that point we'd probably have to have it like if we couldn't define what the end point was, like, hey, the goal is to compromise this system by doing something else. Like if we couldn't operate, like form like a good operational instruction for HackBot, we definitely want to make sure the human in the loop is already ready for that, so we could tell it, okay, yeah, cool, you compromise that system, now pivot to this one next. Let's see. So how are they distributing this stuff? So Kraken Hashes is a distributed password cracking system designed for security professionals and red teams. Coordinates with CPU and GPU cracking through something like Hashcat through a secure web interface. Let's see. Basically a management system to use during hash cracking. Okay, but the question I'm wondering here is, usually whenever I've seen a lot of these systems, when they do distributed cracking, what they're doing is they're doing one job, but they're taking that job and they're putting it over into, like, they're meant to handle multiple jobs to multiple cracking rigs, more or less. Hey, Big Shot, no problem, man. No problem. Yeah. When I put Q&A in the stream title, I mean it 100%. See what I called it, React. Let's see. Let me look at the user guide here. I'm curious. I just want to see a little bit like what they're doing with this. Core concept. Let me see. So you have a hash list. The hash list is a collection of all the things you want to basically crack. Contains one or more individual hashes. Hash is an individual hash that you're going to do. Present job. So job is a pre-configured attack strategy that defines your word list and rules list to applies. Hashcat attack mode for dictionary type. You have a job workflow. So it's a name sequence of preset jobs executed in order. Ooh, I like this because one thing you could do is you could say, hey, we're going to start with common passwords and rules, and then we're going to move to a brute force. All right, I do like that. Because this is what I used to do whenever I was cracking hashes, is I would start with the low-hanging fruit. I would take those and then I'd run them through like basically a password reverser to find like base words and stuff. And then I would take those and then feed them back into the word list and then run the next iteration, assuming that people are going to be using similar words. Like, for example, they might have used some kind of keyword that's related to their business or to their company, and I might not have that in my dictionary. Now I go through and I crack a couple, I kind of reverse that password back down to like its base word, and then I throw that back in the hashing list. So we have job task, and then we have our pop file. Not that kind of pop file, you trolls. This is a copy of all the cracked hashes. So the execution flow is you do a job creation, task generation, assignment. So the agent requests work, the scheduler tells you what's available, finds high priority jobs with pending tasks. Checks the agent capabilities and assigns a compatible task, and then the agent downloads the required files if needed. I want to say I've seen a similar system to this. I don't know. What did they... What is this one? The Skyboat song? All right, yeah, this one's definitely got to go. Hang on. The Skyboat song. Yeah, that one's got to go. When was this actually initially released? It's 229 commits. Let me go check like the very last commit. Let's see. I want to see when was the initial commit in here. Yeah. I know there's a more efficient way to do this, but I guess not. Okay, so I probably haven't seen this project before because this one, it looks like the initial commit was in October of 2024, so about a year ago. Interesting. I like the idea of it. It's just, like I said, I think a lot of times when they say distributed, it's really hard to run an actual truly distributed hash crack. Usually what happens here is you've got multiple, let's call them agent computers with hash cracking hardware in them. And then you're just taking those jobs and you're sending them to other systems. Useful, but it doesn't really let you take like a job and split it and parallelize it. You know, do parallel processing against other systems. Yeah. Hang on one sec. Let me do something real quick here. Since we're going to run out of news here in just a second, I'm going to get RootMe booting up. We'll do a tiny bit of HackBot tonight. We'll see what we can find. All right, get that booted up real fast. I like the idea of it. I actually don't do a lot of hash cracking these days. I do more Kerberos abuse than anything. All right, well, this is the last thing I had kind of flagged as interesting. What is the detonator agent? Let's see. Cross-platform web API for maldev execution.
Incoming transmission from RNO Gumby. Did you push it real good?
I did push it real good. You'll see. The last push was 3 days ago. I actually ended the stream, Gumby, and I was laying in bed, and then I remembered, ah, crap, I didn't push the code. And then I came back and booted my computer back up. Because it's got this really, really weird driver issue, and my computer will just freeze and crash at like the drop of a hat. Hence the reason why actually I wanted to move the streaming stuff off of this computer onto a dedicated system. So if this computer craps out on me, which it's weird when OBS is running, it's strangely a lot more stable. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, when that's happening, that way if the computer crashes, the entire stream doesn't crash. It'll be dedicated over to its own system. So yeah, I went to bed, was laying there reading my little Jack Reacher book. I think I'm on book 8 now. And I'm like, ah, crap, I didn't commit the code. Ran back to the computer, booted up, pushed the code, and then I went back to bed. Talk about learning from pain. For anybody who doesn't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was super excited because we got the exploitation agent working in HackBot. It, for the first time, went through and did the full PHP shell exploit and actually got code execution through it. And then I went through and I didn't want to push all the code yet because I hadn't had time to sift it properly. So I thought I would go make a snapshot of the server. And I was like, oh, you know what? I got a lot of old snapshots in here. Let's clean those up and we'll make a new fresh snapshot. The rollback and the remove button are right next to each other. They're very close. And me not paying attention because I was just so happy the exploitation agent had been working, clicked the rollback button. And thankfully, I had a snapshot that was only 2 weeks old from a power outage. If I hadn't had that snapshot through minor divine intervention, I would have lost 4 months worth of code effort. So, painful lesson, scary lesson. Let's do it again. Hell no. Bad Gumby. Bad. So, Yes, I got out of bed to go push the code because of that incident. The pain has taught me. Always use Git. That's what I'm doing, big doggy. Also, what's up, man? Hadn't seen you in a while. Hope you've been doing good. I am using Git, but I kept pushing off doing the commits and pushing it off and pushing it off until finally I had like 4 months of code that I had not committed to the GitHub repo. And so now, come hell or high water, that code's getting committed after I make changes. Eventually, I'll get a proper dev branch set up and I'll merge stuff from the dev branch over to the proper branch. But anyway. So what is this detonator agent? Let's take a look at this. Fulfills 2 purposes. Hold on, actually, I take it back. Before I get into this, let me do something real quick. I want to go set up HackBot to do its seed run real fast. Ah, damn it. Wish it would stop logging me out. Okay, there it goes. Let me pull up Stinger here. And then let me go grab our test data. Let's see. This is, I need to put in the proper IP address here. And make a copy of that. All right. So while this is working, and in fact, hold on, let me double check one thing. Make sure the VPN is on. Let me restart the VPN because it's been on like this entire time. All right, there we go. Now we'll go ahead and run this. We'll let HackBot do its initial run in the background here. All right, now let's look at this detonator agent. What's it doing? Let's see, fulfills 2 purposes: file execution and EDR log collection. So it's mainly used to see if initial access chains are undetectable for red team engagement. So if your malware is detected, and if yes, why or why not? So it serves more as inspiration on how to implement this yourself into a polished project. It's closely related to red EDR, which collects the same telemetry as an EDR does. It can also be used with detonator to more reliably detonate malware. Maldev? Why did you say malware? Let's see. There was a presentation on this. Let's see. File features. Let me see. So the API will execute the given file so the EDR can do its thing. It's intended to simulate a user clicking the malware. It'll use the Windows integrated default app associated with that file to open it. Okay, so like an executable, zip, ISO. We have different execution types. We can exec it with a process start. We can use AutoIt to run it, or AutoIt Explorer. Nice. Nice. It also do EDR log retrieval. Currently, only Microsoft Defender/MDE is supported. Currently, it returns all Defender event logs. Everybody, I mean, I know why everybody targets Defender to get this. All right, so what this is an agent that's running on that system so that you can go get that on there and get those EDR logs. Hold on, let me look at something quick. What is detonator? Detonate your malware, your maldev payload in a VM. Oh, okay. So install red EDR, copy the profile sample, and then you configure your profile, like what the IP address is. Load the profile, run the server. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. So this is like a malware detonation sandbox. Okay. Very cool. All right. I think that pretty much covers it for the news. Let's see where HackBot's at. Looks like it's running the enumeration agent right now, which is good. For our testing, we just needed to get into the exploitation agent. Where did we end up last time, actually? Let me take a look at this. We had an index list out of range. Let's see. Yeah, so we got a PHP, we had it pull the Diceco web shell, but then for some reason this one, the revisor threw a fit. Oh, it validated, but then for some reason we hit an error in the step router here. So what was the actual error that we got? Let's see. Oh, I think I had this misindexed. I think I've already fixed that. We'll see what happens when Stinger actually comes through and hits its issue. What happens with it. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, cool. So it's down in the execution step over in exploit. Nice. How much have I spent on this? Last time I checked it, I think we spent about $60 in Anthropic tokens. Which is not bad considering, you know, we've been working on this project since, I think, February. Eventually, also, the HackBot that is up on the BlaiseBits GitHub, that repo will be archived and we'll migrate everything to like a fresh initial alpha commit once I get it to that state. Who knows when that's going to be? I thought I was going to have the 4 primary agents done by now. We're still working on number 3. And number 4 is going to be the chunky one. Chunky. Let's see where it's at in the execution list here. Let's see. So it gets the web shell. Oh, something is horribly, horribly wrong here. Cancel execution. Because, see this? Notice how there's no tool calls taking place here? It shouldn't be doing that. So something's jacked up here. So after it gets the Diceco web shell, let's see what happens. So we enter the exploitation agent here. We hit the load pickle, which is great. So we've got a copy of it. The exploitation agent says, hey, so our task is get remote code execution from a web shell. From all the data we collected, we say there's a file upload at panel. It looks like those are going to land in the uploads directory. We have a PHP session running here. So the task it creates is upload a PHP web shell to panel, to the panel upload form. Got it. So then we go to the step processor. Jacked up is a technical term. It absolutely is locked down. So I was actually on a call with a client, the other day, and I used the term chunky. I said, by the way, this is going to be a chunky file. And I had to preface it with, that's a technical term. Everyone thinks it's not that hard till they try and make something, so take your time and do it right. I'm trying to, man. I'm enjoying the process. I am thoroughly enjoying the process, even when I'm, wanting to pull my own teeth out. All right, so if we look at this, these are the steps that we got from our exploit step planner. So get the PHP artifact, navigate to the upload panel, upload it with the file upload input field, check uploads to locate the uploaded web shell, access the uploaded web shell to test command execution to verify success. Okay, so that looks good. Our agent here says, okay, great, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna use the get PHP Diceco web shell Diceco artifact, which is what it should do. That's gonna give it a path to the web shell artifact. Right here, boop. So what it does is it gives it a path to that article. It makes a copy of it and then returns the path. Our reviser comes through and then says, what? Says, hey, that validated. Okay, great. So then our processor here, the router sends it back up to the step processor, which is what it should do. And now our That's not right. There's no instruction here. Oh, this is the RCE check. Okay. Ah, I see what's going on here.
Incoming transmission from Marano Gumby. So since you're making alpha, would this be that beta?
No, this wouldn't even be the beta. This is like, I don't know what you would call this. This is like sub-beta. Okay, this actually makes sense here. So we're making the RCE check here. Tell you what, let's go look at the flow here. So typically, I broke one of my own design decisions when I did this. And that is the step processor here was supposed to do a check to say, okay, did we do an RCE check? Basically, we added, normally each of these nodes would be one language model call up to the language model. But we added a second one over here into the exploit step processor, basically saying, hey, did we get remote code execution early? Because that was one of the issues we found, is that the agents were being a little bit overzealous. It's got a list of exploit steps it needs to go through. And before it reached the end of the queue where it actually tests for exploitation, did we get RCE? It got it. So unfortunately, that meant there were other steps there that were still left in the queue. So what we're attempting to do is, in the step processor, put a check to see if remote code execution happened, and then if it did, jump to the very last thing in the queue. Make this the beta. He's so silly. He's so silly, Gumby. Let's see here. Let me scoot this over real quick. Ah, here we go. Here's the problem. Yep, I see it. So if we come back and look at this, what's going to happen here is we're going to see another RCE check, right? Yeah, so it's going to go through this, and then we're going to come back here again, and we're going to get another RCE check. And so it's never actually doing the step processing because I'm an idiot. We put this in the if else clause right here. See that? We say if the current step is greater than 0, we're going to do this stuff. However, so for the very first step, the current step would be the 0 index in the list. It executed this stuff correctly. I'm a dummy. This else clause needs to go away. I'm a dummy, I'm a dummy. Do, 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 I'm a dummy. Smooth brain. Endless loop. Yeah, exactly. I'm a smooth brain operator. Smooth operator. All right. We're currently on the Charlie channel release. Dude, we might even be down on like the Gamma release. All right, so I left myself a nice little to-do here. So what we need to do is, we need to check this response. We're going to pull out the exploit RCE check, and what we'll do is we'll say if that is true, because like if we look in here, we see it's only a Boolean. It's false or true, right? I'm not sure how to say that. Shreya? What's up, man? Thanks for coming online. Welcome in. I hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday or Thursday, depending on your time zone. Close enough. I'm glad. I love reading the usernames, though, because a lot of times they're very interesting and they crack me up. And just from working in offensive security, it's always interesting what users pick when they get to self-define their username. So it always cracks me up. I would like to see like what little insights can you glean into their psychology from it. All right, I got to remember how to do this actually. So we get the response back, boop. But what we need to do is we need to pull the response tool call out. And let's see. Yeah, it's this right here. Excellent. Reference my own code. There we go. So, but it's not going to be steps we're going to pull back to this. What we're going to pull out is we're going to pull out this RCE value. So we're going to check RCE. We're going to say, we're going to call this our RCE check. And this will be a bool. And we'll say it just like that. Ta-da. There we go. So once we get that back, we can check it. And if this is true, we'll say if RCE check. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get our current step, which we should already have. Yep, we have current step. Then what we're going to say is for I in, I think, length of where can I check this out? Here's our current step. Exploit steps. There we go. That's our list right there. So we'll do for the, we're going to index on that. Oh, I need to do range in here. I think I would do this from current step to exploit step, to length of exploit step, like that. Yeah, there we go. But I know there's a kicker between range. Hold on. One sec. Let me... I gotta remember this for the Pythons. Let's see. Let's see. For I in range from 0 to 10, we're just gonna have it print I here. Yeah, so it prints up to that. So one thing we'll need to do is, since that's the length of it, we're going to need to do this plus 1. Just like that. So let's say, for example, if the number of exploit steps we have is 7, we need it to go from whatever the current step is to that number. Oh, I'm missing a... there we go. Just trying to figure out why that looks so funny. Yes, Big Dog, yeah, I see that. You didn't close your parentheses. You leave it wide open. Were you raised in a Python barn? All right, so after we close that up, what we're going to do is we're just going to go to each of those steps and we're going to mark them as skipped. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. So what we'll do is we'll come to our exploit steps. We'll index that on I. That'll give us our ith entry in that list. And then we will... I got to remember what the data structure looks like. Let me go to my exploit list here. States. Where's the exploit step? Status. There we go. We'll just set the status there. So we'll set this. We'll set the status. Once the status will now be the skipped. Wunderbar. Very good. Gotta let the pog out. Dude, I'm gonna date myself so bad here, but I remember getting pogs. Remember pogs with the slammers when I was in elementary school? Thought those were so freaking cool. Might as well have been Beanie Babies. Let's see. Will you not get an index out of range? I don't think so. This should work because what should happen is if we're somewhere in this list, right? So the length of this goes from, let's say the length is 5, right? In fact, let's just go look at the state table real quick. So if we come up to, let's go up to the exploit planner, right? So post exploit planner, if we go into the processor and we go to examine the state table here. All right, so here's our exploit task. If we look at our steps here, so this is 6 steps though, right? From 0 to 5. So if, for example, on step 3, we accidentally get RCE, what should happen here is that our current index will be 3, right? So we'll start with, oh, actually, you are correct though. Not the exact answer. You're right, Big Doggy. That should have been a -1. That should not have been a +1. No, what did you do? There we go. And actually, you just reminded me because current step... Yes, current step would be okay because we do want to take the... Where do we modify current step, though? Hang on. I got to double check. Here's our current step value right there. So that's where we're extracting it out. I need to know where that current step actually gets updated, though. So here we extract the current step from the exploit task. Let me double check down here what we were doing with this. Current step. I gotta remember where we actually increment that current step. Yeah. I told you I'm a smooth brain, doggy. Told you, man. Now, where did we... I gotta remember where we're tracing this event right here. So whatever the current step is inside the exploit task. So there's a bunch of nested data structures in here. So the first one is the task list. These are lists of tasks, and task is its own object type. But then inside the output of the task, we actually nest an exploit task. So we have task, then exploit task, and then exploit steps in here. So each of those are 3 different types of objects that we're nesting. And then we have a tracking value here, which is whatever the current step is. I gotta remember where that gets incremented though. Actually, it doesn't get incremented. It gets dynamically adjusted. Where did I put that sucker? So here we get the exploit task index. So that tells us if we have, because we can actually have, let's say, for example, in the output, let's say the first exploit task fails, we could actually go through and make another attempt at doing this get remote code execution from a web shell. We could have another one here. So we get the index of it. Typically at 0, it usually succeeds on this first attempt. If we brought this up into an else statement for this, yes, it would be fine. So we might actually need to, that's a good point, Gubby. Let's do, let's put a note here. Might need else block this. Yeah. Peter the Wolf. Okay, that's another song that's got to go. Because that threw me for a loop here. Peter the Wolf. For everybody who has come in a little bit later, I added a whole bunch of new songs to the background music, and it's a ton of them. So I don't know which ones are necessarily good and which ones are not. So as I'm coming across them, I'm making a list of which ones to delete out of the background music. Let's see. So this might need an else block. Actually, I think you're right, Gumby, because here we would put the else block for the RCE check. If RCE check happens, then we'll go through and we'll prepare everything. We'll make it good. Otherwise, we'll go through and we'll do the second language model call. Set remaining steps to skipped, except the last one for the initial access exploit. Okay. Yep. Good call, Gumby. So, let's see. Let me double check something real quick. I think actually that I'll be able to tell actually if I come down to here. So if I look at our step processor, so this one, the current step should be 0. Boom, right there. Let's see, if I go to the back to the step processor here. So the next time we enter this step processor, current step is now 1 as we enter it. So what about when we enter the reviser? Let's see. Current step is 1 now as we go into this. So if we go back, so here's our step processor right here. Maybe it happens during the update. Current step is 0. Okay, so let me go double check the exploit step update real fast here. Let's see. Exploit step update. This must be where we're incrementing it. Let's see, there's our current task. we go to the exploit step index, we pull out the exploit task, we get the current step, and we return our task here. Makes no sense. Hold on. Why is this like that? Hang on. Current step is 0 when we enter exploit step update. Hold on. We can actually check the output table from this. Hang on. Let me collapse this stuff down because our data is, and just for like one host, it's already chunkedified. So here's our output from the exploit step update. So if we come right here, current step is 0. If we go to the revisor, current step is now 1.
Incoming transmission from RNO Gumby. Music is loud, can hear you.
The music's too loud? Alright. Yeah, this one's a bit... I think I need to put a new filter on the music. Hang on, what's that? Baby We Wasted. Alright, I gotta take that one off. It also might have been I was too far from the microphone. Like I said, the new music collection I put in is absolutely massive, and so I could not go through and like pre-screen all of them. Also, I think for the background music, because the music levels are different, I'm gonna have to like adjust the filters in OBS for the background music. I think all the ones for like the lo-fi tracks and for the heartbound ones, I think they're already kind of normalized, so it's not an issue. It's like the decibels got raised. Yeah. Let's see. So why does this one say our current step is 1? Current step is 1. That's very odd. This is indicating that our current step should have increased here. So if our last message was a tool, we're going to append the tool output. We're going to put it right here. Yeah, see that? We don't even actually make a change to the step, to the current step right here. So we check the current step, we do the language model call. Ah, here it is. So it is in the revisor. So if the revisor marks it as validated, it increases the current step value. Okay, so that is where it's happening. Got it. Good to know. So let's come back down to our... Where was that? Here it is. This is where we left off. So it should already be on whatever the current step is as we enter this. So we do want to go from current step. We want to start with this one, because if we've already moved up to the next step in the chain, before we're doing the RCE check, right? So this current step could potentially be skipped. So we do go from current step to exploit length -2, actually, come to think of it. Because you just reminded me, Big Doggy, there's one step at the end that we inject into this that it should always go make the initial access exploit, right? So if we come down here, we always inject one more step into this. Oh, that was I think that was the output. Hold on. Let me come into the revisor. Or maybe we didn't do that yet. We should see it post exploit planner because we actually did it in here. So if we come into the exploit step processor, we'll see it. let's just validate real quick. Yeah, so our last one is create the initial access exploit for the target in here. So we don't let the language model decide this. We inject it and force it to do this final step to create that initial access exploit. So after it's achieved remote code execution, it should go through and create this one right here. Which for this one, it's really simple because it can just go run a function call to get the Python code and insert the variables of like where the URL is and what to touch on it, and it should be good. So we didn't want to go to -1, we wanted to go to -2 because we want to leave the second to last one out. But now I got to check something real quick. Out of curiosity, if I ran this again and I did from 0 to -1, let's say this. Let's say we start, we're on the third step, right? Let's say we have 5 steps total. And so we're on, let's say we have 5 steps. Let's say we have 6 steps total. We're on number 4, right? Let's say we're on number 4. We've got 6 total. So this would be 4 to 4, right? The total length of it. So that's 6 minus 2. Damn it. So this should just be 0, right? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So it's going to just completely skip over that for loop. I wanted to double check that real fast. Awesome. So we'll go through, we're going to mark all of those as skipped. And then we're going to do one more thing in here for our exploit steps. And that is, we're going to go down to the very last one. And we're going to say, let's see. We're going to say exploit step. And then we need to index this on the very last one. So we'll get the last step in here. This would be that length -1 right here. So we'll do length -1, and we're going to change that one. Actually, we don't have to change that anything on that because that's going to become the new step. We want to set the current step to that. So I take that back. So what we want to do is on the exploit task. Exploit task, we're going to set the current step to 5. Yes. Yeah, so we'll set that in the table, and then we will set that in... Actually, I take that back. This is not the way I want to do this, because we have a convention in here where if we break out these variables, we're going to consider them read-only, right? When we write stuff, we actually write it to the copy of the state table. So we basically, if we need helpers to like make it more understandable of what's happening in the state table, we break those out into like what are the essentially read-only functions in here. But then if we're going to write them, we actually write them to the entire state table. So I need to actually change this real quick. So this is going to be state. We're going to get our task out of here. And then we're going to index that on the state current task, because that's a helper function we've got in the state table. And then from the current task, we're then going to get, what do we need from that? Let me think. So here's our current task. We're going to access the output. So we get the output variable. So we'll do output, and then the index of the output is going to be, for here we actually are going to use a helper function though. We're going to get the current exploit. We can we can use that. We can use the current exploit task, the exploit task index. We can't index on that because we're not writing that variable. We're just using it for indexing. And then inside the exploit task, then we're going to get our steps. Yes. So then steps like that. Boom. So then we get our steps. And then that will now be indexed on I. Just like that. So for the loop. Let's see. After we index that on I think I misspelled status when I did this. I did. There you go. Then now what we're going to do is we're going to set the status to skipped right here. So we'll just take that out, back that up, back that thing up, boom, skipped. There we go. So this is how far we have to kind of dig into the state table to get to those exploit steps. It's a little bit of a pain, but it's not bad. All right, so after we do that, we say it's skipped. That will set it, because then what we're going to do is when we return, when this function finishes, we return the updates to the state table. And what we're going to do is we're just going to return the entire state task, just like that, because we've modified that value right there. So after this happens, we actually need to do one more thing in here. Yeah, we need to update current step. We need to update our current step after this. Boop. So after this for loop runs, what we're going to do is we're going to update that current step. We're going to set it to this value right here. Boop. In fact, I kind of want to break that out a little bit. I'm going to do this real quick. We're going to call it, yeah, second last step. I'm going to do that. Second last step here. There we go. Hey, Gratitude. Thanks for coming online, man. Welcome in. I hope you guys are all having a fantastic Wednesday. I was having a really rough Wednesday until three things happened. One, I had a nap after work because I was brain dead after work. Two, I had some dinner. Three, my kids told me what a great day they had. I was like, okay, not a bad day. They had a great day. I was working. It was a good day. Okay, cool. So we'll get that second last step. Actually, I want to modify that real quick. Index. There we go. So we'll rename that index. So our current step, now we're going to set it to that same value here. Except that's not going to work. That is not going to work. I just realized. Because we don't want this to always be -2. This should actually be -1. So let's modify that. Let's call this refactor. Let's do this. Let's see. Let's see. Now do that again. There we go. This will be nothing. This will be -2. That'll give us the second to last step. This will give us our last step. Boom. Hey, Range, what's up, brother? That is not good. You guys still there? Everything went crazy. There it goes. Not sure what happened. Everything went nuts on the network side. Had some kind of a network blip. Probably going through AWS US East 1. If you know, you know. Let's see here. All right, so after we're going to set this to our current step to be the second to last one here. Let's see, that sets it in this outer scope, and then okay, cool. Thanks, Wrench. Yeah, I just got like a bunch of nasty grams from all the streaming platforms saying like nobody's there. I'm here. Good. Went away for a few seconds, then it came back. Okay, good. It must have been a really bad connection, sure, because usually what I've got is I've got all the chat kind of combined into this window, except for Kick. Oh, they haven't supported Kick yet. But the message you sent didn't work. Hold on, let me try something real quick. Okay, it's back up now. AWS is down again. Probably, man. All right, so once we get our updated current step here. Let me think about this. Where are we doing our exploit step here? Where's this actually being defined? Did we define exploit step? Where was it? Ah, here we go. We need to update exploit step right here. In fact, I think we can... Let me try something real quick. I'm going to comment this out. It doesn't break anything in this loop. I didn't think we were using it in there. Breaks are right there, but that's fine, because what we can do is take this out. Bring this down here, just like so. Oop, there we go. Yep, didn't need that. So now what it's going to do, since we updated the current step, now it's going to come through and do all of this stuff here. So we do need to add an else check to this block right here. Ooh, come to think of it, actually, I take that back. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Because this is still inside this if current step greater than 0. So we needed to be able to hit both of those things. So we don't want an else conclusion there. What we want to do is we just want this check to happen if we've already executed at least one step, which is it goes through and it checks for RCE. If it does find RCE, then what we're going to do is we're going to skip to the last step. So we would do want to go put a logging message in here. So let's do that. So if this one, we're just returning our response. You know, we didn't put any logging messages in here. I'm surprised. I'm very surprised by that. Usually what would happen in here is we'd have a list of messages being appended to like keep track of what's happening. Let me go double check something real quick in the trace. So if we come over to our trace here, and if we look at all of our messages, let me come down to like the second exploit processor. Let's just collapse all this stuff down. There we go. So here's our messages. What we should see is something like... So like right here, see how we have like a recon validator AI message? I guess I didn't put any for the step processor in here. So here's our step update. We appended the tool call, or the tool call output, I should say. Huh, interesting. I can't believe I didn't put any in there. Here's our exploit agent, right? In fact, that's incorrect. That shouldn't be exploit agent. This is, there's a typo in here. And it's not bad. Did I check out the new OpenAI crappy powered browser? Yeah, I haven't checked it out. I've been seeing a lot of the stuff people have been doing with it, and per usual, it's vulnerable to prompt injection. Yep. Yep. Don't test the code. Just push into production. Good devs test in production. They do. Who need you? Every developer has a QA team. It's called the user. All right, let's see here. I kind of want to be able to do at least one run with this. All right, so let's think about this. So this will be skipped on basically the first execution. It's going to skip all of this stuff, and then it's going to come down to here. So we change the current step, and then we let it run all these things here. So the current step is going to change if we have RCE. Set the remaining steps to skipped, except the last one for IAE. Let me make another one in here. Update. Oh, you know what I just realized? We didn't update the current step to this either. So we do want to do this in here, but also we want one more thing to happen in here, which is we want to go target. No. We need one more thing to happen here. Let me break this out so it's a little bit more readable. So we run through the for loop, and then once we hit to the exploit task, we want to change this. We want to change our what is this? For the exploit task, it is current step. Yeah, it should be a current step, like that. Current step, we're going to change that to step length -1, like that. There we go. So this we're doing because this is what we're going to ultimately emit back to the state table. We're doing this for internal tracking right here. So we get the exploit steps, we get our current step. That one should still be new. We should change it to working. Yep. Oh, just like that. Excellent. Testing your code is doubting your abilities. Right? I have severe doubts in my abilities. But so far, actually, the code's been working pretty decently. Okay, cool. So yeah, all we have now is we have an initial RCE check. Let me put a note in here. Let's see. Check for early RCE after first step is completed. There we go. So if the current step is greater than 0, we'll do the RCE check. We'll set this information here. So basically, it's going to take all those steps, set them to skipped, except for the very last one. And then we set our exploit step here to index whatever the current step is. We've updated the current step. And then we basically take out the step task so we can feed it into here. Okay, cool. Yeah, because what happened before is, if I remember correctly, maybe it was this run. Yeah, so here we called the PHP web shell dice code, right? We got execution of like the very simple ID command. If we come over to the revisor though, post revisor, or let's actually look at the exploit step processor, right? Let's see, take it back. Let's go back up to here. So in the revisor, if we look at this, it was just supposed to access the web shell, right? But if we look at what the actual, where that step lived, here's what happened. So we collapse these down. So the first step, obtain the web shell. Second step, navigate to the upload form. Third step was rename the PHP web shell. Fourth step was upload the web shell to the panel. The fourth step was just access the PHP web shell. Make sure it was there. Number 5 was then test web shell execution. So what happened here is this one actually proved RCE. This one should have not happened at all. So we should have been able to bypass this step, skip it, and then come right to here. So in a complex chain, if something happens and the language model gets like overzealous and figures out how to get RCE, because they do have a little bit of freedom, we've restricted it a lot, then it gets to be a pain like that. Sorry, hang on 1 second. There it goes. All right. One of the monitors was not working. So now this should actually allow us to skip that. And so if that's the case, it should go through and do the early RCE detection. So we're adding a little bit of overhead to this. We could have, in theory, actually put this into the revisor. I wonder if that would have been the better thing to do, now that I think about it. Because if we look at the revisor prompt here, right? The revisor output has a couple of options to it. We could have put all the RCE stuff over into the revisor and combined that into one single call, and not having to have to break the method where one node is one language model call. It is kind of stupid. All right, unfortunately, it's about time to wrap up. I know it sucks. I can't do late streams right now. I have a ton of work right now. Let me put a to-do in here for this. To-do. Should we merge this to the exploit revisor? When's it going to take the job I never had? This one will never take that job. Never, ever. This is meant as a toy for a learning tool and to have fun building. That's what it's meant for. All right. Unfortunately, we do need to see if we can find somebody to go raid out to. So let's see if anybody's over on InfoSec streams. CyberDoc is on. Perfect. All right. Let's do that. Unfortunately, guys, that is where I've got to end it up. Do me a favor, though. Once you get over to CyberDoc, and I'm going to drop the link over in YouTube for anybody who wants to go check out CyberDoc over on Twitch. You go check them out in there. But do me a favor, once you get over there, drop a couple of Hack the Planets. All right, let's go set up Zared. Our Mind Every Night. That's another one that needs to go. I got to get rid of these songs. Our Mind Every Night. Yeah, that's another song. Some of these songs are not good for background music, so we're going to trim them out. All right, let's get this going. I got to skip this song. It's bugging me. There we go. That's better. All right, guys. Everyone continue for the week. The week's not over yet. Continue crushing it. Let's go strong into the week. Do not go weakly into the week. And all right, Wrench, keep that grind up, brother. Everyone, I want y'all to have a fantastic rest of your week. We'll get back to do a little more HackBot on Saturday. Have some fun with it. And I want y'all to remember one very important thing, and that is, I love you. Peace.